ready to begin. Good morning, dear guests, everyone who is here today with us. It's great honor to have this room filled with so much professionalism, but foremost with kind, big hearts, because all of you are working towards a better future for the world. All of you are shaping children's hearts, children's lives. So we're ready to open our trauma conference. Today we're going to talk how to support trauma recovery in war-affected children. And I hope that all of you will be able to complement these discussions, but also that together we'll develop the resolution that we'll be able to put in front of the government to make some change. So please enjoy this event. St. Mary's team worked really hard to make this happen. And to start with, I would like to invite to the word the person without whom me personally, but every Ukrainian in London and in UK wouldn't be able, I think, to find peace within ourselves in these hardest times for Ukrainians. The person who's dedicated his heart to the people, Bishop Kenneth Nowakowski, who is the leader of our Ukrainian Catholic Church here in UK, and who is also the role model for us, all Ukrainians here. Bishop.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ina. Thank you, dear friends, for attending this conference. I've been at so many conferences over the last 2.5 years, and usually somebody at the conferences. I'm really sorry that we have to be meeting here today. I'm sorry that I've met you. Of course, that means in the context that Ukraine was invaded, that we have this horrible situation in Ukraine. But also, I want to, before I lead us in our opening prayer, want to acknowledge the incredible generosity of the British people who have opened their homes, their hearts. The government leaders, the civil servants who have tirelessly worked to make sure that those who have arrived here in the UK have a safe place, are welcomed. All of those ordinary Brits, over 80,000, who have opened their homes and hearts initially to us. When the invasion first came to light, that horrible day of February, and we saw the photographs of so many people jumping on trains, leaving the areas that were being first affected with children. Even then, we started to think these kids are making a journey not to a summer camp, but a journey to something unknown. So as we begin our day, first of all, let us give thanks to our loving Lord for all that he does for us. Surely we are the instruments here in this room that will provide healing not only to the many thousands and thousands of children who have been affected by this war, but also to their families who we will be in contact with, in communication with. May our Lord bless all of those in the helping profession. May our Lord protect all of those in the helping profession. May our God send his Holy Spirit to be with all of us during today's discussions, debates. We pray for peace in the world, not only for Ukraine, but all over our troubled world. That our homes, our communities, our streets raise up women and men who want peace, who encourage peace, who encourage each other, who respect each other in their beliefs, in their traditions, in their customs. And we place ourselves under the protection of all of the saints of the United Kingdom and Ukraine. Amen.
Thank you, Bishop Kenneth. And to continue, I would like to invite over here to address you all, the Second Secretary of the Embassy of Ukraine to UK, Iryna Yehorova. It's a great honor that we have representation of the embassy here today. So thank you.
Good morning. I do apologize for being late. We've got unexpected urgent meeting at the embassy, and that's why I was running to you, and finally I found you. Dear distinguished guests, dear ladies and gentlemen, дорогі українці. First of all, I would like to thank you for joining us today in order to pay attention to Ukrainian children amid ongoing brutal war. Let me express our deep appreciation to the St. Mary's Ukrainian School and its great leadership team led by Inna Hryhorovych for all their outstanding efforts dedicated to supporting Ukrainian children across the United Kingdom, as well as the initiative of today's conference. Thanks to your efforts, dialogue, you are now true ambassadors of the bright side of history, supporters of human values and life and health-changing projects. In terms of ongoing war, Ukrainian teachers bring not only knowledge, but also comprehensive care about nation's future. We extend our deep gratitude to the UK government for its remarkable efforts in aiding Ukrainian families fleeing the war in Ukraine and for their warm reception here. We appreciate your efforts in ensuring that Ukrainian children have the same access to high-quality education and childcare as UK citizens. We are also thankful for offering unwavering aid to Ukrainians, providing them with shelter and setting up favorable conditions to continue with their everyday activities. The lives of Ukrainian children today have changed dramatically. Preserving the national identity of young Ukrainians and taking all necessary actions to give them access to high-quality Ukrainian education overseas is one of the main our responsibilities and priorities now. At the same time, we are concerned about Ukrainian children abroad. Currently, British schools have accepted over 20,000 Ukrainian children. This indicates the importance of developing solutions to provide venues for our kids to continue studying Ukrainian education. We do hope that our partners in the United Kingdom will give their support to the project of establishing a bilingual Ukrainian British school in London. I'm confident that this approach will enable us to encourage and strengthen our children with the goal of helping them live calm and prosperous lives in the future. For the sake of maintaining their national identity, for the sake of Ukraine's future. Dear colleagues, it's needless to say, but we witness to countless tragedies around the world. Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine has brought death, devastation, and unspeakable sufferings. Russia turned the lives of millions of Ukrainian children upside down, leaving them orphaned, destroying their homes, and stealing their happy childhoods. The Russian occupiers are committing deliberate genocide of Ukrainians, including children. After all, they want to destroy us not only physically, but also mentally. The consequences of war and mental health are crucial topics for parents worldwide, and it's essential to keep on drawing attention to the scale of the tragedy of the war against Ukraine and possible ways to reduce risks for children. No child in the world should experience war. All of them have only one childhood, and it should be happy and peaceful. Kids should count goals, not missiles. They have to play and even to cause the mess around. Their health and well-being are even more important. And in September, the fourth summit of First Ladies and Gentlemen in Ukraine proved that the well-being of children concerns all of us. We're thankful that the United Kingdom remains one of Ukraine's closest and most important allies. Together, we can achieve everything we need. Ladies and gentlemen, As we assemble here today and we stand in solidarity with Ukraine people, I would like to encourage you to take advantage of this opportunity to share our knowledge and experience in order to consider how we might contribute to the brighter future. Thank you for organizing and participating in the conference, and thank you for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Ina, and thank you. Huge thanks to the Embassy of Ukraine to UK for continuous advocacy and fight for the needs of Ukrainian children, displaced Ukrainian children here in UK. And with the next speaker, Dame Rachel de Souza, Children Commissioner of England, unfortunately couldn't be with us here today physically due to other commitments, but of course she couldn't have left the children of Ukraine out. So she's going to address the audience in the video poster.
Thank you to St. Mary's Ukrainian School, the Centre of Anxiety, Stress and Trauma, and the Embassy of Ukraine to the UK for organising this important event and for inviting me to give a few opening words. My name is Rachel de Souza. I'm the Children's Commissioner, but I'm also the granddaughter of a Ukrainian. My role was born out of the acute needs to hear the voices of the most at-risk children. War-affected children living in England are among the most vulnerable. Despite the horror of what they've endured and survived, too often they are overlooked when it comes to specialist support to recover. I am delighted that today's conference is centred on how we can help children fleeing conflict to thrive and brings together professionals from across health, education and social care. Since I came into office, I've met hundreds of asylum-seeking and refugee children who fled some of the most unstable and dangerous countries in the world: Ukraine, Afghanistan, Syria, Venezuela. These children are almost always incredibly vulnerable. That's particularly true when they arrive alone without their parents. I've met children who've arrived here alone as young as 12. No one who has even a passing understanding of children would say those children don't need and deserve our full care and support. And yet, despite children's acute vulnerability, too often they're not been appropriately safeguarded and supported. Data I obtained from the Home Office last year shows many children are left at risk of exploitation and abuse. Nearly 450 children went missing from the 8 hotels that were used to accommodate children by the Home Office. That shows just how systemic the failures to protect these children have been. Thankfully, children are no longer being accommodated in these Home Office hotels. We must ensure this never happens again. And despite the trauma of what they've experienced, refugee and asylum-seeking children struggle to access timely and appropriate mental health support. Children often don't get the right help to support them to develop the English language skills to integrate into school. Too many are not able to access education. It's not good enough. This is a country that prides itself on upholding and protecting children's rights. Think of my mother, who came to the UK aged 7 as an unaccompanied displaced child to be reunited with family. I'm forever grateful to this country for welcoming her with open arms. We need to reignite that national spirit. Displaced and war-affected children are children first and foremost, no matter where they've come from. Like any other child living in this country, they deserve loving, caring support so they can recover and thrive. I want to see extremely vulnerable, unaccompanied children in the care of local authorities from the day they arrive. I want to see children who have experienced the most serious harms able to access timely and appropriate mental health support. I want every refugee and asylum-seeking child to be in school as soon as they're ready to go back to learning. I've had the pleasure of meeting the brilliant St. Mary's School, which is a haven for children fleeing the war in Ukraine. It's a space of safety and hope, giving children the building blocks they need to create a new life here in the UK. If we can get this right for children from the day they step foot in this country, we can support them to get their childhoods back and grow into adults who can contribute so much to our society. I think of my own incredible young ambassador, Sophia, who was forced to leave her home because of the war in Ukraine and come to England from Kiev. Despite English being her third language and only having 1 year to catch up, with the right support from her school and her own native intelligence, she was able to sit her GCSEs and go to college. I can't wait to see the amazing things she and all the other children in this country will go on to do. Thank you.
As I mentioned earlier, we wouldn't have done all of this without the support we get from every agency in UK, from all of you and from the government of UK. So we're really grateful that Dame Rachel is really a huge advocate for all of the children of UK, including asylum-seeking children and refugee children. And he also very, very honored to have here a true supporter of Ukraine and also very experienced educationist, Dame Christine Ryan, who is the chair of Ofsted and who is here today also to address this lovely audience and to support us first and foremost.
Well, hello, everyone. I think Rachel, a close friend and colleague, we came together, actually, to see the school in action. I can't remember now how long ago, but, I mean, she really has summed up what it is that we need and why we're all here. So thank you very much for inviting me to take part in this conference. I think it is tremendously important. It brings together those who have helped St Mary's to provide support for thousands of children and their families, working with over 200 schools across the UK. So this isn't just a London-centric initiative. Iryna and her team have acted with amazing speed to mobilise agencies and individuals, providing critical services as soon as they saw the first wave of families displaced by the war. With the help of local authorities, schools, health professionals, the church and others, they have accomplished an enormous amount. I myself was struck even by the level of education that these children, only weeks in the country, were able to settle to, and the work, the quality of the work that they were able to produce. But that need has not diminished. Displacement and trauma is continuing. New families are affected every day. But the needs of those already here also continues. Indeed, for many, there is now a second wave of trauma in coping with the reality of ongoing bereavement and anxiety for loved ones who are still fighting in Ukraine. These war-affected children are carrying an enormous burden that impacts them every single day. In this country, we rightly place great emphasis on the safeguarding of children, recognising that they cannot learn effectively if they do not feel safe. And although families look to a time when they can return home, that time is uncertain. And so it's incumbent upon all of us to make sure that we do everything we can for these young people so that they can once again thrive, developing their talents and skills, so that wherever they are in the future, they can make a positive contribution to society as happy and fulfilled citizens in their own right. But timing for these children is critical. And we'll hear later from specialists about the importance of early intervention and ongoing support. We know, too, that teachers have a massively important role to play in normalising life. But they first need help with further training and professional development so that they can identify and address trauma in children and understand how best to nurture them and enable them to reach their full potential. From my own experience of teaching traumatized and extremely disadvantaged children, it is important, particularly, to not assume that children's struggles to adapt are best mitigated by lowering expectations. We've been very fortunate as a country, and that we have not had to deal with trauma from war on this scale for many decades. But teachers across the country do deal every day with children who are suffering trauma for all sorts of other reasons. And we know that too many of these children often end up disconnected from their education and at worst become disaffected adults. So we can all learn from the work that St Mary's has done to better equip ourselves and our professionals for nurturing not just the Ukrainian families and children who are with us, but that much wider group of individuals who can benefit. We already have a model that Inna and her team have put together and that we know works. Effective collaboration between a school, local education authorities, councils, NHS professionals has produced a network that integrates mental health resources with educational initiatives, ensuring an holistic approach to each child's well-being. This is a model that works and works well. But the next phase requires further commitment and, yes, resources. But we also know that any initial costs will be greatly mitigated by the benefits in the future. Experience always tells us that if we have to fix bigger problems later, that is always a much greater cost, both financially and societally. So what next? Well, firstly, this work needs to expand so that it can reach all regions in the UK. We need to look at how we can enhance initial teacher training and ongoing professional development so that teachers have the skills they need to work successfully with trauma-affected children in the classroom. We need to raise awareness, strengthen partnerships between support services in all regions, particularly ensuring we're providing the right psychological support to children. And we need to establish a base for monitoring the progress of displaced families and their children, for helping them to access the support services they need, and to provide a network of ongoing support, engaging local authorities, and importantly, helping to integrate families into their local communities. The support of policymakers is absolutely crucial. So I ask everyone here to do what you can to find effective and creative ways to support these efforts. Inna and her team have been absolutely relentless in their mission. We now have to play our part to learn from the St Mary's experience and expertise. In the process, we will benefit. We will know more, and we will be better equipped to help others in our community. It is not only for the Ukrainian families that are with us, but it is the right thing to do for everyone in our society. So I wish you all a good and productive day. Thank you.
What a speech. Thank you very much, Dame Kristen, for all the support, but also for all of these crucial messages, for all these words, for the benefit of all of the children particularly those impacted by crisis and who UK have agreed to support and have taken commitment for. And to continue, we also wanted today to be in participation with our colleagues from Ukraine. None of us can imagine and can understand fully what every Ukrainian in Ukraine are dealing with every second of their life. We try to do our best to support everyone in our place. We know are doing the maximum we can to help Ukrainians stand there, protect their children, protect their nation, protect their country. And I'm very pleased that today with us, despite all of the challenges that Ukraine is dealing with electricity, connection, everything, missiles, being in the bomb shelter, I hope that at the moment, Iryna Suslova, who is the representative of the Children Commissioner for Children's Rights in Ukraine President's office, is safe and can be with us online from Ukraine, from Kyiv. Iryna, we can hear you, so the whole audience are ready to listen to you.
Thank you so much. As you told, hello everyone. My name is Iryna Suslova. I am Ombudsman representative for child rights protection. And first of all, I would like to say thank you. Thank you for this organizing this important event. I thank each and every one of you who joined us today for your attention to the problem of Ukrainian children and your concern to their grief. 2 years ago, Russia started a big war in Ukraine. During this period, the millions of Ukrainian children were evacuated abroad like refugees. Near 4 million children every day stay in our country with alert, with missiles and bombing, as you know. And near 1.5 million children, unfortunately, during this period stay at the occupied territory, stay under the risk to be deported every day and every minute. And at this time, it is a great honor and at the same time a great responsibility for me to speak today on a topic that unfortunately has become extremely relevant today: support for the recovery of children affected by war. As a representative ombudsman for child rights protection in Ukraine, I repeatedly witnessed the devastating consequences of Russia's armed aggression for our youngest citizens, which requires the response of Ombudsman's person's office, Ukrainian authorities, and assistance from partner and international organizations. The Russian military is shelling residential buildings, hospitals, schools, and kindergartens. They destroyed a lot of buildings, and that's why our education, unfortunately, to be offline in all of our country. At this time, they killed at least 579 Ukrainian children and injured at least 1,644 children. Unfortunately, these tragic statistics are growing every day. This date is not a final because we don't have any access to the temporary occupied territories, as you know, and do not know the extent of Russia's crimes there. And it hurts. After all, as I told before, 1.5 million children remain under the occupied territory to be the risk, stay under the risk to be deported, and more than 20,000 children, as we verified, like Ukraine, were deported or forcibly transferred to the Russia territory or to another place in occupied territory. Ukraine, together with our partners, with the country mediator, with NGO and our international partners, still working tirelessly to free children from Russian oppression and return them at home safety. Right now, we return just 964 children. However, this is a paltry figure given the numbers of crimes committed by Russia. Currently, 4,000 criminal proceedings are being investigated in Ukraine for war crimes against Ukrainian children. In Kiev, there is a child rights protection center opened with the support of the main partners of UNICEF. We are working at this child rights protection center right now, and one of the topic which we are work together with our international partners and NGO. It's try to find our children in occupied territory and the children which were deported, try to return them to Ukraine, and of course accompanied here when they have some investigator with psychologist and our Office of General Prosecutor and Security Service of Ukraine. And of course, after we returning these children, all of them has psychological support from our NGO partners, Voice of the Children, and we try to accompany them during the next 18 months with psychological support and, of course, with their social needs. After all, the numbers of terrible crimes that I have cited are not just tragic statistics. Behind each figure is the fate of a particular child. Children in Ukraine experience violence, loss, forced migration, separation from the parents, relatives, and friends. They experience the deepest emotional wounds that we can live. And we have to pay attention not only to the physical destruction around them, but also to the invisible traumas that we will remain with them for years to come. Therefore, I am sincerely pleased that we are here today not only to discuss the Kremlin's criminal statistics, but to think together how we can collectively protect the most vulnerable among us, children. How can we help them feel safe again? How can we restore their trust in the world when everything they know has been destroyed? And, I want to say you thanks for this opportunity to be here today, to hear what you will propose. I want to tell you that we are doing a lot, like Office of Ombudsman, with NGO, like we try to monitor what doing our government. But of course, we I think we don't do enough because we have a lot of challenges, and if we will have support from our international partners from another countries, if you can share to us your forget this word. I'm sorry. If you can share to us your experience, if it will be grateful for all of our country to using all of this knowledge. Thank you so much, and I'm sorry for my not so good English.
Iryna, English was great, thank you. I think we all appreciate that you adapted to be here in this conference with us, and we all understood you perfectly well. Thanks again for everything you do for Ukraine, for Ukrainian children, and all our heads down to every Ukrainian for all you do. Thank you. The conference goes on, and as you can see, we have had and continue to have a lot of support from different agencies, from different people. And when the full-scale invasion started, we were a small organization, a Saturday school. We definitely were not prepared for that, for the war. We didn't know what to do, where to go. But the UK government responded quickly and was very stern in their position. We are going to support Ukraine as long as it takes to win, was what they were saying. And that was important for us to hear. We were called into the meetings in different ministerial departments, not like for the first time ever in our life, not even thinking we would be allowed to be there. They wanted to hear our voice. They communicated with us. We all acted quickly and efficiently. And at that point, the Minister for Homes for Ukraine was Felicity Buchan, who also was the Member of Parliament for our constituency with Ukrainian school, NUGB London, our place in Holland Park, and thanks to the program from Dezyk, St. Mary's was able to expand our provision from education support workers project into doing more specific trauma recovery technique provision, which we were able to pull off more on a wider scale thanks to the grants that we received from the Children and Young People Fund from Dezyk. And as you can see, we turn every penny into huge provision with the help of all of you here. But without the resource, without the official support on the policy level, on the government level, none of us here would be able to continue, scale it up, and do that next step that is so needed. So Felicity, I'm happy that you're here. I'm really honored that you're here today with us. Please welcome.
Well, first of all, I just want to say what a pleasure and honor it is to be with you. I am very, very fortunate to call so many people in this room my friends. And I wear this brooch that a few of you gave me with pride, quite a lot, to be honest. I'm no longer the minister, but I'm sure that if the current government were here, they would echo the sentiments I am going to say. We are resolute behind Ukraine. Clearly, it is difficult times, but there is no question that the British people are behind you. And we see that in the Homes for Ukraine programme, because the generosity of the British public made that possible. And 215,000 Ukrainians are now in the UK as a result, and we've also extended about 35,000 visas. So there is no question we are behind you. I think that this conference is very important. As a minister, I wasn't only responsible for Homes for Ukraine, but also for Hong Kongers coming to the UK and Afghans, and everyone has their own individual challenges. But one thing is clear, that we need to provide safe harbour, especially for young children, and we need to be aware that children are resilient, but even though they may be resilient on the surface, there may be deep-seated issues that may only actually come to the surface when they're 20 or 25 or 30. And that's the reason that I was incredibly proud to be behind the fund that Ina mentioned. So about 2 years ago, we set up a fund for children and young adults, specifically for Ukrainians, Hong Kongers and Afghans who had come to this country to help to deal with trauma and integration, because there are huge issues going on, war, displacement, integration. So I'm all behind this initiative, and I'm sure that the current government is too. Thank you.
Thank you, Felicity. And yes, we have been really flattered in the last 5 weeks since we opened our doors the new academic year with the visits from local MPs to every Saturday and Sunday school. They spend a day with our children. They wanted to know more about the support they do. And we feel the support of the current government and in continuation of the programs for Ukrainian people in UK. As I said, today we wanted to really bring both sides in, professionals from UK, Ukrainians in UK, but also representatives of Ukrainian government. Very, very unfortunate. Until the last minute, we thought Natalya Pipa would be able to be here with us, but there was a delay with the visa. So Natalya is with us today online. She is a Ukrainian politician. She is the member of Ukrainian Parliament and secretary of our Verkhovna Rada Committee on Education, Science and Innovation. So voice of Ukrainian children. Наталю, доброго ранку. Доброго дня. So you got full hall here, so really welcoming audience, and would like to hear from you as the secretary for the Committee of Education and also the member of Ukrainian Parliament.
Доброго дня. Я, напевно, все-таки буду говорити українською. Я, перш за все, хочу насправді подякувати не лише за цю конференцію.
Yeah, well, first of all, I would like to thank for this conference, for this initiative, because if nothing is not given enough attention, then it does not develop in the right direction properly. As a representative of the government of Ukraine as a state, I would like to thank everyone here in the UK for supporting Ukraine, everyone in the school for helping the Ukrainians, as well as the Ukrainians here who helped do that, and the British people, of course. Because this school is not just supplementary school, it's not just a place to meet. This is a place where children can overcome the trauma sustained because of the war and become a full-fledged members of the Ukrainian society, of the British society and the world society. Just as an example, for example, 2 minutes ago, there was a alarm in Lviv district, and what you do here, it would be very beneficial for us to take this experience and transfer it to Ukrainian as well. Everyone who is now in the world in Great Britain, who is Ukrainian, you are the ambassadors, and therefore it's very important for building bridges and for Ukraine to become integrated, become the independent and responsible partner. As a member of Ukrainian Parliament and also as a member of a friendship group with the British Parliament, I'm crucial in establishing these ties and implementing the program that St. Mary's Ukrainian School is working on right now and implementing. We would like to take over the experience and apply it in Ukraine. Well, and I would like to reiterate again, as the member, the representative of the state of Ukraine, that I'm very grateful. I would like to thank the British government for helping us win this war, help us create the world with the values that we share together with you, because we have already won in World War II together. Just to stress again the importance of the Second World War and percentage-wise the number of Ukrainians and Belarus people who were killed fighting for the freedom. So it is, would like to stress that again.
United Kingdom knows very well what is it war for independence and for freedom and for values, and to really thank you that today, after so many years after Second World War, we have this opportunity to have this bigger territory when will be democracy, and thank you that you help us to stay on these values of democracy and freedom. And this conference is one of this very important ingredients. Is this everything? Is this this conference and education Ukrainians in United Kingdom is part of this very something that we try to change in this world. Excuse me that my English is not perfect, but I still learning.
Thank you, Natalya. We could understand you perfectly. And again, thank you for all you do in Ukraine. Thank you for the partnership with us. And thank you for also joining the conference today. And we hope that the visa will be there, and for the next initiative, you'll be here with us face to face.
Yeah, because at the moment I have information a few minutes ago that I have visa already and I can come next time. Then will the appointment. Thank you for your work, and we'll see you in the future, but keep in touch. And next, our question is like textbooks, yes, and we will discuss it. Keep in touch.
So the textbooks that Natalya mentioned, of course, we try to be in continuous communication with the Ministry of Education in Ukraine. We try to do everything possible that that there is no gap in Ukrainian education element when children need to reintegrate back into Ukraine. So that's another pressure that adds to the traumatic anxiety for these children, because that question of reintegration going back means they need to kind of settle and feel happy here. That's what the society is expecting. We've provided everything here for you. You need to feel happy, but then they need also to think, do I continue with the pathway here? But then I need to also pack another suitcase, which includes the diploma, the secondary education certificate, the knowledge of Ukrainian language, linked with home, friends in Ukraine, because in case I'm told tomorrow I need to go back to Ukraine, I need to be fully equipped and prepared. So the Ukrainian government are providing testing new books, so we try to use those books here in UK as well. I will have a great honor to introduce a true friend in Sonference Ukrainian School who's seen us from the grassroots in the current state. Hanya Dezyk, who is the Deputy Chair of Association Ukrainians in Great Britain, Ukrainian born in UK, and descendant of the first wave of refugees to this country, and also the person behind the Ukraine appeal by the EGB, also one of the initiators of the Ukraine Welcome Center, and also proudly the Holodomor Essay Prize coordinator, which is really part of another trauma aspect we'll talk about later. Anya.
Good morning, everyone. Well, first and foremost, I'd like to extend a heartfelt greeting from the Association of Ukrainians in Great Britain, and also personally as a governor of St. Mary's Ukrainian School, and a long time ago in history, I was also the head of the Parents Association. So I know the trials and tribulations of, as Inna said, at the grassroots of St. Mary's. So greetings to all that have joined this crucial conference organised by Ukrainian St. Mary's Trust. It's not just about gathering here today, but a beacon of hope and healing for Ukrainian refugee children who've endured unimaginable trauma. These children have faced the most harrowing experiences, and yet they stand as symbols of resilience and courage. Our mission today is to discuss, share, learn about the best practices and treatments that can help them reclaim their childhood and build a brighter future. And it's interesting that Inna mentioned the previous wave of refugees after the Second World War, of which my father was one. And I remember my mother telling me a story how trauma of what he had been through after the Second World War, when he came to this country, only came out 10 years later when in fact he had a nervous breakdown in the middle of the street. And in those days, the treatment was electric shock treatment, which actually she didn't sign up for. And he then tried to recover from the trauma himself. So the fact that these types of programs, St. Mary's Ukrainian School, working on trauma for children, is really a shining example of understanding what children are going through and trying to really preempt those traumas that will out in the end. Maybe not today, tomorrow, but in a few years, and they need to be looked at now. I think the other thing with having Felicity here, our association, and as St. Mary's also mentions, is that the UK government has really taken on board, I think, the case study of how Ukrainian refugees have been welcomed to this country, and also the programs that have followed on from that, should really be adopted as a shining case study of how to bring refugees to this country, to understand that the diaspora organisations can help immediately. The Homes for Ukraine scheme was set up very quickly. It was a unique scheme. As we understand, refugees had never been welcomed by sponsors in the country previously. So it was a very unique scheme. But right from the beginning, the UK government, the Department of Levelling Up, various ministers came and understood that the diaspora groups who were already here could be a key linchpin of developing further programs, and that they listened right from the start. We were involved in many core delivery group meetings on safeguarding at government level and so on. And this is a fantastic case study for the future for welcoming other refugees who have been in a similar situation. So I really do hope that the UK government does take those learnings on board. So really today, I really hope let's use this opportunity to connect, collaborate and contribute to a cause that is as challenging as it is essential. So thank you for being here, and let's make every moment count today. Thank you.
Thank you, Hania. And a huge honor. I'm very pleased that Lyuba Lyubchyk, Ms. Lyuba Lyubchyk is already here with us. As I said, today is not just about a specific cohort of children. We want to raise the questions of all the children impacted by the war, by crisis. For Ukraine, in our context, that means that 1 million children who are today outside Ukraine. 897,000 of them are in Europe. And of course, Saturday schools, Sunday schools like ours, like St. Mary's Ukrainian schools, have become beacons of preserving those children's identity for Ukraine. And to coordinate that all, we have at our Ukrainian World Congress, we have a special committee, special council, International Educational Coordinating Council. And today with us, we have Lyuba Lyubchyk, who is the chair of that council, who is going to speak on behalf of all these children who will face similar traumas. Because just to add another thing, we are live streaming and we will send the video recording. We hope that this conference, to the day, your discussions, your contributions will be watched and used by Ukrainian diaspora, not just in UK and education in UK, but also around the world. So we really try to bring as many professionals as possible. Доброго ранку, пані Любо, раді вітати.
Вітання у Великобританію, вітання пані Ірино, вітання вельмишановному поважному товариству.
Good morning and greetings, Great Britain, greetings, all the esteemed guests here. I would like to greet everyone who is now fighting for the Ukrainian interests and values, because everyone who fights for that is fighting for the state, this very important war together.
Як голова Світової координаційної освітньо-виховної ради Світового конгресу.
As the chair of the Ukrainian World Congress and in particular International Educational Coordinating Council, I here attest my full support to the educational program that is aimed to protect the Ukrainian school abroad, to protect the Ukrainian teacher abroad and the Ukrainian students abroad who are either displaced or just live abroad.
У цей надскладний для України час, коли жити і
We are
вижити
living through these very hard times, and I would like to underline the importance of the historical processes that we all witness today, and attest the importance to support the children that are now abroad, and we need to change the current legislation. I understand we're talking Ukrainian, and recognize the Ukrainian supplementary and Saturday schools towards being recognized as the proper schools, and they have existed for over 100 years now, and this is the high time that we pay attention to that and change it.
голос кожного з нас є важливим.
The voice of every and each of us is important, but all our voices are unified in this goal. So I call on to all the Ukrainians to unity and to unify our efforts and use them to support the Ukrainians and change this.
Я хочу щиро подякувати організаторам за
I would like to again thank the organizers of this very important conference that is going to consider and review all the very important decisions that are being taken and draw the conclusions that will help us in the next steps that we are going to plan and achieve.
Кожен наш крок.
Every step that we take, everything that we do right now is another step towards our joint victory together.
Слава Україні!
We today, one of our main tasks as representatives of Ukrainian Saturday Sunday schools is really to bring an official status to their activity so that our documents, certificates we get to children can be recognized when they return to Ukraine, but also our role has changed because of the full-scale invasion. And at this note, we are over with a special guest note. All this support is hugely important for us because we understand that in the work we do, as been mentioned by all the special guests and all the previous speakers, we need resource, we need policy change. And of course, the speakers who've spoken are the true advocates for that, and only working together we can bring the legislation in which will help us win the time and prevent certain processes for the future cohorts, because unfortunately there will be future cohorts of children coming from crisis. And I would like you all to fix your eyes on the screens for the next minute and a half.
В лютий 22-го року мені подзвонила мама, що бомблять мої місця, там, де я була, от буквально літом. І в мене те, як от впало небо. Я плачу, їду, а ще так пробка була. Я дивлюся на людей, оглядаюся, а ніхто не плаче. І я думаю, люди, чому ви не плачете? Ну для мене це просто от було життя до, і потім почалося після 24-го.
22 лютого я проснулася від вибухів. Мій чоловік, він військовий. Він одразу зрозумів, що це. Ми вибігли в коридор. Я забігла до дитини в спальню. В нього від звукової хвилі відчинилось вікно. Я забрала Ігоря до себе. І Юра, це мій чоловік, він так і сказав, ну все почалось. Було дуже страшно. Дитина в мене в аутистичному спектрі. Тобто він не дуже розумів, що відбувається.
Коли на третій тиждень після повномасштабного вторгнення до нас поїхали родини, ми зрозуміли життя по-новому. Через призму, через очі і історії цих дітей, цих родин.
This is just a short teaser to the film we've put together on the stories and the impact of our work. And we were preparing for today's conference, but it came out much more powerful. And we made a decision that we will put a separate event for reflection of what is in that movie. So we'll invite your colleagues to come together for an hour and a half to do the screening and to show you the screening and to discuss on the next steps. And that will be also a good follow-up for us on what has been done here and what else could be done. It's very emotional for every one of us here, Ukrainian or non-Ukrainian. No one can stand by and indifferent when these are the stories of the children, that when the war becomes not the childhood, the part and dominates the childhood. And I've been thinking many times how we will put this conference together. That is the biggest dream for me today as a head teacher, to have all of you here in this room. Every one of you have been part of the project that helped to support 2,500 stories, which you've just seen on the screen. Those two moms featured in the screen in the film are the parents of the children we've been looking after. The stories they're sharing with us are very similar and at the same time different to another 2,500 stories, because each of them, they cannot be united under one story of war. Each of them is the story of their life, changed life, unplanned life, unpredictable future. And together, you helped us make their future slightly brighter. And together we are here today to help them not just to survive, but to thrive. But that won't happen as quickly and as easily as Putin managed to destroy their childhood in 1 minute. Unfortunately, to bring the childhood back and what's been destroyed will take decades. And this is what this conference is about. Are we ready to continue with commitment we've taken on when we said we are behind these children, we've invited them here? Are we ready for the commitment of the decades? What needs to be done so that this commitment is not just on paper and words? This commitment really becomes their new life, their new dreams. Because one of the hardest things for these children is to dream again. What we've shown also on the screen are the flashbacks of the two families, of what they witnessed, of being through 2 years ago. But unfortunately, this is the reality for families who might come here yesterday. There are still families from this morning. There will be families from this morning for whom this will be just a recent reality. So the difficulty of the question we are raising here today
in relation to Ukrainian children, to other children living in wars in the democratic world of the 21st century, is that this trauma is ongoing. We know that healing starts when the trauma trigger is over. And all these professionals here, you know this really well because you are working with these children. Unfortunately, this trigger is not over. Even more, it is becoming stronger. It is unpredictable tomorrow. Usually they say predictability is the metaphor on happiness. So what will be the metaphor to unpredictability, which is a true description of every Ukrainian child today? I'm talking on behalf of the children today. We'll leave the parents slightly in the shadow. We'll talk about them later. The speakers will say how this model works together. But I'm speaking on behalf of those children who are in Ukraine today, studying in the bomb shelters, or awaiting when it's going to come off. I'm speaking on behalf of children who witnessed horrors of Bucha, horrors of Irpin, horrors of Mariupol, evacuation of Mariupol under what was supposed to be peaceful evacuation, the flooding of Kherson and Novakowka. I'm speaking on behalf of those children who are today treated definitely unfairly and in a military way on the occupied territories. It hurt 1.5 million children on the occupied territories, being brainwashed, humiliated. I'm speaking on behalf of those official 20,000 children stolen to Russia and those who've been already trained and are being put into the army and sent to fight on the fields of Ukraine. I'm speaking on behalf of those children, of that million scattered around the world. Why all of them? Because we do not know who is, firstly, all of them, the children we are working with represent all of those four words. But also, we don't know which story will come to our doorstep tomorrow. Because that's our unpredictable reality today. Unpredictable reality of every professional in this room. Unpredictable reality of every teacher in this school who's committed to do the best for their children. And they are. But do they know how? Are they sure that they can just trust the intuition? They need support. And these conferences are there so that we can come up with a resolution of the next steps. We've done enough already to bring these children to a physically safe environment. I've said that before and I'll repeat again. Safe physically, but are they safe when they're one-to-one with themselves? Are they safe with their trauma? I don't think so, not yet. Because as everyone mentioned, the trauma of the war, the trauma of displacement, the trauma of integration, the trauma of having your relatives in front line, the trauma of losing your relatives, because unfortunately the statistics of war is catching up. And today we're dealing with more children with bereavement than in the first 6 months of the war. So these are the challenges we are facing today. And yes, what we can do is that the children are definitely in a safer environment. It is now proven scientific by psychologists that we have better chance to help them heal their trauma. Therefore, we need to unite our resources to make sure that those children that we've managed to save and we have a greater chance of helping them heal the trauma, we can do the most for them to become that cornerstone for the Ukrainian society when they will be reconstructing not just the building, not just the infrastructure, when we'll be reconstructing our nation. Because what is being done today against Ukraine is the genocide. This wouldn't have happened, as I mentioned, without the support. And the support started with trust. First, trust from the children who were opening their hearts to us. Trust from the parents who brought their children to our schools and to our provision we do together with you. Trust from the staff who jumped into unknown because we couldn't promise them salaries, we couldn't promise them jobs, we couldn't promise them anything. It wasn't predictable what's next, but we knew we were doing that for Ukraine. It also happened thanks to the trust from our partners in the local authority. And I cannot not mention today the local authorities of RBKC in Westminster. And that's a special clap for them. Thank you very much. Because when me and Orysya and our staff had dozens of children on our doorsteps every Saturday and every Sunday, we were not trained to be, there is no course. And that's what our teachers are dealing with, because every school around UK had a child who came from war on their doorstep. We had dozens of them and hundreds of them. We were not trained what to do with them. We definitely knew we cannot harm them anymore. We knew that we want to create not just a learning environment, we want to create a healing environment. And we went to you for help, and you listened. And then other agencies joined in. CAST came, NHS professionals came. Then we had DLAC participation, involvement. And we had this strong idea. We could see what we could do differently. And it was Education Support Workers Project. We didn't have funds for that. And this is when the Daily Mail readers who kindly donated to the appeal, Mail Force appeal, and we were chosen by Mail Force to be the charity that got a big grant to push this off. This is how we managed to provide 30 full-time education support workers into 200 mainstream schools where we started to make change together. Again, we had the benefit, we had some benefits, and schools had benefits. Combined efforts brought the change. From day one, we found ourselves in the epicenter of trauma, epicenter of direct and indirect impact of war. And healing couldn't be just done, we understood healing could have been done just with 1 hour with the support of psychologists. Education is here, you know, that we at schools make the change with the support of psychologists under their supervision. So what do we do today? We know we cannot fix those children now, but we can prevent certain things in the future. We can keep these children off the streets. We divert anger into positive energy. We prevent the escalation of their health problems. We keep children and parents together. When the father is already in the war and just mom, who is struggling her parenting, being on her own in this country, there are lots of cases where they are on the edge. We help them stay together. We prevent radicalization. We prevent crime. We prevent homelessness. We get them onto career pathways. And together, with these processes, we enrich British society. Thank you. And all my words would be empty words if not the results of and the impact of what we do, and if they were not underpinned by real stories. I've got Lisa here with us. Lisa, as I mentioned before to you, that it all starts with trust. Lisa trusted us. Then her mom trusted us. They were the first ones to join in our programs, which were pilots, but they trusted us. And Lisa today is going to share her story with you.
Good morning, my name is Lisa, and I'm 14 years old. I came to amazing historical London from beautiful and picturesque city of Kiev. One winter morning, I was going to school, but my mother said we should pack the essentials and go to the bomb shelter. I collected the most necessary clothes, books, and notebooks. When we were already with things near the car, a fighter jet flew over our heads, tearing the sky with its thunder. I was scared, I was shaking. I did not understand what was happening, and I asked my mother if this was our fighter. Mom answered me, it was ours. She did not dare to tell me the truth, as not to scare me even more. I found out the truth even much later. And from that time, we went in a search for a safe place for a temporary stay. I'm happy that thanks to the kind and open to the sorrows of others, British people, we're here in a safe place. And we're still living in kind and wonderful and gorgeous family. I love them very much. In English school, it was really difficult to me to find friends. I didn't understand what they were saying to me. I was afraid that teachers would ask me a question in the class. I was scared and felt helpless. In summer of 2022, I first came to the camp for Ukrainians at St. Mary's Ukrainian School. I made friendship that have been with me since day one. I felt more confident, communicative, and open. These teachers gave me a lot of support. They listened to us, and we listened to them. We support each other. It's still difficult for me to join the English team, but I really want to. I know that in St. Mary's Ukrainian School, I will always have many Ukrainian friends and a lot of support. After attending TAT sessions as a student of St. Mary's Ukrainian School, I learned how to better cope with my emotions and manage stress in a healthy way. The techniques through in the program, such as relaxation breathing and creating a mental safe space, helped me understand my emotional responses and gave me practical tools to regulate them. This experience not only provided my own personal growth, but also showed me how these strategies could apply to help others, especially children who has experienced trauma. I believe that the war in Ukraine will soon end and peace will reign through the world, and all people will live in peace and harmony, supporting each other and enjoying in their life given to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And I think today, those members of staff of St. Mary's who are here wouldn't be prouder. So yeah, well done. The next speaker is known well to those who are working with us on Education Support Workers project and on the Trauma Recovery Technique project, because Tanya Humberstone picked up this project really quickly, took the lead, and the teams, and who we sometimes in our meetings with CAST and local authorities say, the person who knows the needs of Ukrainian children into every detail on every child of those 2,000, on her project, 1,500 approximately, is Tanya. I don't know where that computer holds that, but yeah. So Tanya, over to you on the distinctive framework of the Education Support Project.
Good morning, distinguished guests, friends and colleagues. I'm honored today to present Education Support Project and Teaching Recovery Techniques Initiative. These projects addresses not only educational needs, but also emotional and psychological needs of Ukrainian children displaced by war. But before I begin, I would like to acknowledge immense support and collaboration we have received and keep receiving from British professionals across education, healthcare, and social services. Your work, your expertise, and your commitment have played a crucial role of even making this project possible. Thank you so much. I also understand that there are many children in the UK, whether British, refugees, immigrants, or just other children across the world, face huge and immense hardships. These hardships can come in forms of domestic abuse, emotional abuse, neglect, broken families, broken homes, poverty, instability. These children carry invisible wounds, and sometimes they feel lost, scared, can't concentrate, alone, and with trauma affecting their ability to learn, to grow, to thrive. So in my speech today, I will only focus on the experience of Ukrainian children faced by war. But we strongly believe that other strategies that we have developed can be applied and will be beneficial to all the children, no matter where they came from, because our biggest desire that every child, no matter where they're from and what they've been through, deserves a future filled with hope, opportunity, and a chance to rebuild their lives. So let's just start with the war. In February 2022, as the war broke out, thousands of Ukrainian families had to flee Ukraine, seeking for a safety place. In those early days of uncertainty and chaos, St. Mary's Ukrainian School became the first school in London to open its doors to thousands of families. It became a shelter, a sanctuary, and a safe place where children could continue their Ukrainian education and receive the emotional and psychological support they desperately needed. Yes, they arrived safely in the UK, but they were all mentally scarred. The families and children shared with us their stories of war and devastation. They had seen their homes destroyed, school left behind, and families torn apart. Some spent days in bomb shelters without water and electricity. That anxiety, stress, and uncertainty were overwhelming. Yes, we could see those children on Saturdays and monitor and observe them, but during the weekdays, from Monday till Friday, they were struggling. They were struggling to adapt to a new environment, especially to new education systems. And it's just not always the language and cultural barriers that they faced. It's their trauma affecting their ability to succeed academically and socially. Their parents were also struggling to rebuild their life here in a new country where their husbands are left behind in Ukraine. We understood that we need to do something with that. So the motivation behind creation of its project was to create a bridge, a link between Ukrainian families, Ukrainian children, and English school system. We wanted them to help to adapt to the new system and also be emotionally and psychologically stable so they could heal and thrive in this new chapter of their lives. We wanted to ensure that no child is left behind and the trauma would never become a barrier or an obstacle to their education and integration. I remember my first day working in our BGC and Westminster and primary schools. I arranged a meeting with the head teacher, English teachers, and Ukrainian families and their children. And what they shared with me left me speechless. As a parent myself, I can't imagine my own children going through such horrible experiences and at such a young age. When the children saw me first, there was a massive smile on their faces, knowing that I am Ukrainian. I know their language, I can understand, they can relate to me, and they can trust someone who is from Ukraine came to support them. I met the children who had lost their family members, who had been trapped in bomb shelters and whose homes have been destroyed by the missile strikes. I will never forget the tears of those parents who desperately were begging for help, who were heartbroken, who were shocked and lost, who were unsure how to navigate, how to guide their own children through this pain. And we understood that it's just not educational support that they needed a deep emotional feelings. At schools, those children presented themselves often as quiet, reserved, withdrawn, and defiant. Teachers grew deeply concerned, knowing how these children are struggling to adapt but they didn't know how to connect to them. It's not, they just didn't know how to. And it wasn't, it's just they have been through so much in their life, and such little things as trusting their kind teachers and peers, for them it just felt impossible. Their world has been turned upside down, and they were scared of that uncertainty that had followed back him. Many of the children expressed their feelings by drawing. They used to draw tanks, destroyed buildings, shooting, crying figures, all in black. Those images spoke louder than words because they reflected what they really had witnessed. Teachers wanted to help, but they didn't know how to reach them. The children didn't want to open up because they believed nobody would ever understand what they've been through and what experience they had. So they were carrying their trauma silently, and it was shown in everything they did. On the other hand, there were parents, I remember, who were saying to me, oh, we are from the western part of Ukraine. You know, we are not traumatized. We escaped early, so our children didn't witness anything. But this is not what we have discovered. One day, the children who seemed very strong to us and acting, they gradually started to open up, and they shared their feelings they were having on a day-to-day basis. They are fighting the battles we can't see. During my work at school, we discovered the following challenges, which is trauma and psychological distress. Even if the children didn't witness the war, they are also traumatized. It showed up as anxiety, depression, and fear. It is very hard for them to focus, to concentrate, and just be children simply again. It's just not a stress. For them, it was like a real pain. Language and cultural barriers. Many children struggled with English, and it was difficult for them to communicate. I remember I was speaking to the girls in secondary school, and they were saying, can you imagine, we all sit in a class, people laugh, people learn, and I don't understand everything. For me, all these words just blend into a noise. I want to belong so much, but I struggle. I don't know how to, which leads to isolation. The children try to stay away from everyone and very, very reserved. Also, another one is differences in lifestyles and education. So, as we just mentioned, the UK's education system was completely new and confusing for many children. They had to adjust to different teaching styles, classroom dynamics, expectations, and which could be overwhelming and frustrating. Bullying and discrimination, sadly. But Ukrainian children reported that not all the children can be kind to them. They are called refugees, and it makes them stand out. People say that they see us as we are different, as we don't belong, as we are not here. And that leads to loneliness. Economic and financial hardships. Many families are struggling financially. You know that to afford living in London, it's expensive, not to talk about to secure the right accommodation. And it's also a huge challenge for many, affecting the children's ability to focus in school. Also, unfamiliarity with local services. Many families are not aware of what support local services can provide and where to go if they need. These concerns by the parents, by the teachers, and by the children showed that we need a model combining education, emotional, psychological support, and social care. We understood that multi-agency approach was essential to address the full range of their needs. By collaborating with multiple professionals or organizations, we were able to offer comprehensive support that covers not only the educational aspects, but also psychological, emotional, and social dimensions of their well-being. We began holding regular clinical meetings with a wide range of professionals, including education teams, Ukraine Response Team, local authority, CAST, Center for Anxiety, Stress and Trauma, NHS psychologists, social workers, sample professionals, bilingual educational psychologists, early help team, family hubs, and others. We came together to ensure that every child receives tailored assistance. During our clinical meetings, we discussed the complex cases of children from different angles to make sure that the child will get the right support, or we will refer him to the proper services. as Ina just mentioned, this all started from one person. Now we have 30 people who are working full-time. So we are working with 250 schools, and we support 2,500 children in RBKC and Westminster, Kingston, Richmond, Hillingdon, Hounslow, Merton. Every education support worker received comprehensive training to ensure they are equipped to handle the wide-ranging needs of these children. These included trauma-informed practice, safeguarding and keeping children safe in education guidelines. Our framework focuses on the key areas, which is education, socialization, psychological support, and medical support. So for education, we provide different English classes like ESOL classes, GCSE revision classes, learning assessments, preparations for SATs, practices, healing classes. Social care. One of the greatest challenges these children face is isolation. We focus heavily on social integration by creating environments where children can build friendships and feel a part of community. This includes structural social activities that foster a sense of belonging, and medical care. Health is another critical component of our model. Many of the children need ongoing medical care, particularly for mental health concerns. Through our partnerships with NHS, we ensure that every child's medical needs are met, whether it's through routine checks or referral with a specialist. The impact of this project has been short of transformative. Displaced children, many of whom arrive with deep emotional scars and educational gaps, are now making remarkable progress, both academically and emotionally. Their journey of healing and growth is a testament to the power of targeted, compassionate support. For children with special education needs, our tailored interventions have been life-changing. These children, who often struggle to find the right support, are now thriving in their learning environments, proving that we give them the right help and no child is left behind. We also speak about the dramatic increase in the classroom engagement as children become more confident in their learning, more connected with their peers. Perhaps most inspiring is the resilience that these children have developed. Why our project is unique is because we have personal assistant, like personal ESW. Why we are different, for example, from the social services is because all education support workers are Ukrainian. They're all teachers, and they have the same cultural and mental background. And children understand us, they can relate and trust us better than any other services. Preventing trauma. We don't just wait for trauma to get worse. We actually work to prevent it. By spotting every early signs of emotional struggles, we step in quickly to provide support before things like PTSD develop. This early help is crucial and essential for the children's mental health, allowing them to learn how to cope and manage their emotions before they escalate. And complete support of the child, as we said, academic, emotional, social, even medical needs because of our multi-agency approach. Some of the projects are coming to an end, and we see it's just the first step we have done to help these children prevent risk factors of developing post-traumatic stress disorder. We need funding, we need your help, we need your commitment to work together and to ensure these children will receive the right support and more trauma recovery techniques. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. And you'll be able to hear more about the detailed experience of the ESW project in the workshop in the afternoon. And as we move on, I am very honored to invite the next speaker over here. As we said, we educationists had the benefit of understanding the language, cultural background, the infrastructure of education in Ukraine. But we needed supervision. We needed guidance on the medical side. We needed a team to come on board who will guide us within British psychological framework and will provide that medical supervision that will enable us to unite educationists with psychologists and healthcare professionals. Dr. Jai Adhyaru, the psychologist, chair of CAST, yes, and the professional who's dedicated her career to working with different cohorts of refugee children.
So as Tanya and others have described the model in terms of what has been done, I thought it might be helpful for me to explain why. I think it's been obvious through the very emotional stories we've heard this morning, the reasons we absolutely need to support children and families arriving here, to explain why we at CAST have dedicated so much time and energy to supporting newly arrived populations. CAST stands for the Centre for Anxiety, Stress and Trauma. We were initially established within CNWL NHS Trust, bringing together expertise from a range of disciplines and professionals that had worked in crisis and disaster in a range of different contexts, ranging from the Paddington rail crash to the Grenfell Tower fire, to the more recent arrival of different refugee groups that we see here in London as a result of conflict and war across the world. And CAST brings together three key elements, which are training, consultancy, as well as supporting longer-term research so that we can share and disseminate our learnings from one area to help other cohorts and populations. We strongly believe that training alone is not really enough. I mean, you can access training from a range of providers. We're very fortunate to have excellent training programs in the field of trauma and anxiety and stress. But I think what this model has showed is the benefit of training being incorporated alongside ongoing collaboration and the skilling up of people, particularly those that have close connections to the community and can deliver interventions in first language. So our model focuses on bringing the three elements together in a very collaborative way. Underpinning our work are guiding principles that collaboration is actually a prerequisite. We as outsiders cannot enter into a system, a community or group and hold the expertise. We need to understand and learn from the expertise of people that have the lived experience of their own circumstances. And partnerships provide a better and quicker and more responsive services, as this model has shown us. For that reason, for our funders, it's important to highlight that it's a very cost-effective way of delivering high-quality services, rather than funding different organizations in isolation. By working together, we can achieve much more robust outcomes. We acknowledge that expert resources are required because often the funding is not used in the most beneficial way. There are lots of well-intentioned and helpful programs, but I think what we've covered this morning is that if we don't address the health, the physical health, the mental well-being of people, the mid and longer term consequences can be quite devastating. So it's really important that we focus our funding and our resources and expertise into helping people understand how to make effective use of any resource that's allocated to a population. And capacity building is really important to us and to our model. We want to be able to step away eventually. I know my colleague John would say, we know our work is done when communities and organizations can carry on without us. So capacity building, as St. Mary's have shown, is possible in actually a relatively short space of time, is a really strong marker of success. So you know the statistics, and one of the things that I wanted to highlight is that government support, as we've seen this morning, has been really essential in allowing us to support the Ukrainian population. This has been variable for different cohorts, but we know the research shows us that the context in which people arrive and the welcome people receive makes a lot of difference to how people can be integrated and supported. So we heard this morning about the schemes like the Home for Ukraine schemes, but also the employment schemes that have supported people to gain access to employment have made a very difficult situation that's slightly bit easier. And we would love that to be generalized across different cohorts. Tanya described very eloquently the difficulties faced by people arriving here, which we describe as forced migrants, because as I was listening to Lisa describe leaving home, I think it's important to remember that this hasn't been a choice for many people, a forced choice perhaps, which is why we refer to this cohort as forced migrants. And forced migrants face a number of problems and difficulties when arriving into a new host culture. I've outlined some of those there, which might seem obvious, but what really resonates with me is a quote that I found from the literature, which talks about the cultural bereavement that occurs when you are exiled. And that sounds really strong, but I think there is so much loss. We talk a lot about the trauma, but there's also a simultaneous loss of what is familiar, what is comfortable, what has been certain, what is known, to then exist in a context of uncertainty, of language not being understood, of friendships that are difficult to foster, loss of contact with family and friends. Just a few weeks ago, I conducted a focus group with some of the young people at St. Mary's, and the concept of loss really resonated in their conversations about how they are straddling two worlds at the moment, attempting to engage in the systems and the education and life here in the UK, while at the same time trying to foster friendships, but also experiencing a sense of loss and of connection to people back home. And I think what St. Mary's is really doing for these young people is helping them to keep that connection in both worlds. It's so important, and it's sometimes often forgotten when we think about medical terms like PTSD and trauma and anxiety. Whilst there's an impact on arriving populations, there's also an impact on the local community. And I think we're so fortunate, echoing the gratitude of previous speakers, to our local councils for their understanding and expertise and ability to respond to the impact on the local communities as well. So this is a bi-directional process. The people arriving have a set of difficulties that they encounter, and the local environment also can struggle under pressures of existing waiting lists, as we're all aware of in the NHS, the pressure of housing, the pressure of the cost of living, the pressure on our educational systems and capacity. What these difficulties highlight is why we need to work together to do something, and why it's a responsibility of each and every sector to work together, because the responsibility cannot lie, I believe, within one department. It's not strictly a health issue or a housing issue. It's actually a societal issue, a community issue. And again, we've found such variability across the country based on interest, enthusiasm, and government support. So we're very fortunate that we've been able to implement our desired model, which I hope can be generalized to other areas. So again, Tanya highlighted the importance of collaboration. And what I've attempted to do here is put together the key components. I've left a few blanks because I'd welcome your ideas later on over lunch and in the workshops this afternoon. We've found that collaboration actually requires a robust structure that, as I said, involves education, health, social care, housing. St. Mary's Ukrainian School represents a very key component in collaboration, which is first language connection, cultural connection, and I guess a familiar space. CAST has worked with other refugee cohorts in previous years, and we've similarly worked closely with community organizations because we know that the familiar is such an important aspect for people who are in a context of uncertainty and unfamiliarity. When we were working with Afghan arrivals following the bombing at Kabul airport, we worked very closely again with first language voluntary sector organizations. I think there may be people here in the audience that have collaborated on that project. We worked with local community organizations. For Women is one of the projects that supported women from different groups working together. When language was a barrier, we found that activities could connect people into a shared understanding. So collaboration is really important, and what CAST does is uses its expertise in navigating systems and fostering relationships to provide a platform within which that collaboration can take place. Not just as a series of high-level meetings, but at different system levels. Collaboration needs to occur at a funding level, at a reporting level, and accountability level. But collaboration also needs to occur on the ground in an ongoing and sustainable way. So the expertise in implementation is part of what CAST brings to offer and share in terms of the model of sustaining a good program. So we talk a lot about screening, and again in the workshops this afternoon we'll go through this in a lot more detail, but why do we screen? So to state the obvious, we've talked a lot this morning about the experiences that people will bring and the many, many different stories and personal experiences that will contribute to how people are doing, how they're feeling, how they're able to engage and integrate into life here in the UK. Screening is a really helpful way of identifying and intervening early. It's a term that comes from the medical field and generalizes to the psychological field. And psychological screening for things like post-traumatic stress disorder is crucial because of the medium long-term devastating effects that PTSD can have. If we can intervene early, we have the opportunity to help children and young people and their families stabilize, to learn skills to help them cope and manage with their symptomology, and also to seek specialist intervention as and when it's required. John this afternoon, who is an expert on screening, will talk in great detail about the different reasons for proactively screening. But one of the things to highlight is that by the very nature of trauma, avoidance is quite a key component, whether that's avoidance in thinking about what we've experienced or avoidance in talking about it. There's certainly avoidance in coming forward for help seeking. There's often a belief that if I deal with something else first, I'll be fine. And in many cases, that's very true. People do need a sense of purpose and structure. But as one of the speakers this morning described, sometimes the impact of trauma can come much, much later. And often the focus on the practical issues can delay the awareness that trauma symptomology is starting to creep in. So because we know that people don't proactively come forward to seek help, screening can help us identify those that might be at risk. And it also helps us to streamline referrals. We know our mental health services are quite stretched. So the more that we know about somebody's needs, the more that we can support that referral, the greater the likelihood of that referral being accepted and the person supported in an appropriate way, without having to go through revolving doors of different agencies. So screening has a lot of benefits and is something that we've used as the underpinning of the multidisciplinary approach that CAST has used. It's important to note that trauma or post-traumatic stress disorder is not diagnosable by screening alone. It's a window into the likelihood. And it's also important to note that for many children, while it might seem that the war itself could be the reason for their traumatic experiences or sense of loss, we've also found that there are, of course, other things that happen. In some ways, life carries on. People may experience illness within their family. They may experience bereavement. They may experience traumatic events in the locality that they're living in on arrival to the UK. So it's important that we keep a broad lens when we're speaking to children and young people about their experiences. There are many reasons for trauma, which are outlined in the diagram on the right. But using brief screens is an evidence-based way of having a very short, conversational-based interview with young people. We use 2 measures, which are outlined on the screen. And as was echoed earlier, I think Tanya is our encyclopedia of the conversational way of having a record of children and young people's needs. We ask 8 questions, but actually it's this skill in being able to develop the trust and provide the context in which children and young people feel comfortable answering with great honesty. And again, I reiterate the first language skills and the cultural connection has helped children and their parents feel very comfortable in disclosing what's really troubling them. Screens are very quick and easy to do. They don't require clinical expertise, and a key component of our collaborative trauma recovery model has been to provide that training and reinforce that message. As I outlined in the first slide, we provide training not just around what trauma is and what PTSD might look like, but also in how to screen. The more people that can screen, the better. It doesn't need a psychologist or a doctor or nurse to undertake. And actually, widespread screening means that we can reach more children and young people to better understand the needs of the cohort. So St Mary's staff, already being very skilled educational workers, are very well placed to undertake screening in schools. CAST trialled a school-based screening model following the Grenfell Tower fire, and there are many reasons that we find that screening in a school context works really, really well. First of all, children are required to attend school, so it's a good place to find them. Also, schools can provide in-house support, so where needs are identified, support can be provided in the way of counselling, but also a range of other interventions. Schools can also help to build social connections, and school attendance in and of itself is a real protective factor for helping children develop their resiliency, particularly refugee children. I provided a link to some of the research there, which I can talk about more later in the afternoon. So what have we learnt so far? It's interesting to observe that the overwhelming majority of our young people are in adolescence. And adolescence is a difficult time, regardless of whether you're forced to displace and move from your country of origin or not. So again, I could probably spend a full hour talking about some of the challenges of being a forced migrant during your adolescence. But that statistic is an important one to hold on to, and again, an area that we will talk about in the afternoon. Language skill is also something that can prove to be a significant barrier. I'm so impressed by the rate at which English language skills have developed amongst the Ukrainian children I've worked with. I think it's absolutely amazing, but yet it still presents a barrier to accessing and engaging with education. So similarly, we think about how we can also screen, and with colleagues like Kateryna, who will be speaking shortly, first language screening is really, really important. It won't surprise you to hear that we have found quite a high level of trauma symptomology amongst our cohort. Almost a quarter of the young children screened are displaying some kind of trauma symptomology. On the one hand, that might not be unexpected given the context, but in contrast to the home cohort, to the UK population, we would expect PTSD to be at around 1 to 4% in the general population. So that gives you a comparative example of the needs that this cohort has and the challenges we might face in adequately addressing those needs. So in my concluding slides, the point I want to highlight is that it's not just about PTSD, and intervention is often staged and planned to address the child and the family's needs, which has meant that we've referred to a range of different agencies through our multidisciplinary meetings. Having clinical expertise to understand the impact of trauma helps us understand how we might best engage the child and the family. What needs to come first? Do we need to offer some parental support? Do we need to stabilize the education first? Do we need to provide some intervention to that child, which we've done using a model from Children in War called Teaching Recovery Techniques. So we've provided some insights and statistics. But what's really crucial is that we can offer children an intervention whilst we think about what specialist input might be required. As I said, resource is a challenge here, and our statutory services are quite busy at the moment. So the programme offered by Children in War has been a key component in our screening and stabilisation intervention. So I think I've summarized the key aspects of the collaboration. They're summarized there for your reference. Continuity of support, which is personified by St. Mary's Ukrainian School, having a hub, having a place where people can return to, not just the support, but to ask questions. Needs will evolve over time. And having that ongoing continuity is really crucial to then be able to link into a multidisciplinary forum, which understands and can guide professionals on how to navigate and access pathways remains crucial. Tanya's covered a lot of the issues pertinent to children and young people, and of course our insights are no different in thinking about what else children and young people need support with alongside PTSD intervention. So what do we do with all of this information? As I said, we're really keen to think about how we continue the work. Hearing from children and young people has been the backbone of constantly adapting the services that we deliver. It's not just clinical services. As speakers before me have said, it's a holistic approach that incorporates engagement and leisure activities and education. And focus groups with young people provide us a window into understanding their needs. Continuing the offer of stabilization through the TRT groups is also key. There's huge potential to deliver this as a standard intervention within schools, perhaps, schools that receive refugee children, communities, local youth centres, and thinking about support for parents. As Iryna said from the outset, we would really like governmental support to think about how this model can serve as a generalised treatment approach to help all refugee children arriving to the UK. So lots to talk about, a snapshot provided, and I will hand over to Kateryna next to talk about the detail of some of the work that we've been doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jai. And we've got two more speakers before the break. Kateryna, you're the right person to keep us still going. For us, it was always from day one. Yes, as I said again, we didn't know what to do. We needed psychologists on board. So supervision from CAST, but also we needed in-house bilingual psychologists who could communicate the needs of Ukrainian children, understand them, and communicate back to the CAST and other agencies. And here she is, Kateryna Yavna, who's taken that role, and thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Hello. I'm worried that is why I would speak a little bit bad English. Sorry for that. My name is Kateryna Yavna, and I'm Ukrainian psychologist and CBT therapist accredited in European Association. I was engaged for this project by the director of Ukrainian Sonference School in Hryhorovych to teach a program called Teaching Recovery Techniques, because I'm a trainer for the Children and War UK Foundation. As a part of this, I also led and support of the teachers and education support workers in their roles of screening and working with children and their parents. I also supervised them carrying out the TRT program and co-facilitated a TRT group myself. However, I believe that the biggest impact on the Ukrainian community in the opportunity to have one-to-one sessions with more severely affected children and parents, and there be circumventing the very long NHS mental health waiting list. All I have just said can be summarized as to help and prevent PTSD in Ukrainian families was my main role. I want to thank teachers and education support workers for being my eyes and ears with children and families. I also want to say thank you to my UK mentors, and especially Professor Bill Euler, who sadly recently passed away. As a co-founder of Children and War UK Foundations, he supported and taught us a lot. I also want to thank my colleagues, Professor Dennis Ubram and Derek Bolton, who support and teach us a lot in our individual work with families. The next slide is already been mentioned by my colleague Jai and Tanya. It's summarized as many and pervasive stressors are for any refugee. And remember, it's trauma stress, it's resettlement stress, is acculturation that they meet in new environment, and as was mentioned before, isolation. You can see how many challenges Ukrainian families face after moving into the UK. It's understandable that on this journey they encounter difficulties that lead to traumatic symptoms. Just to remind you, the traumatic symptoms is a short way of keep us safe, because hyperarousal symptoms, constantly scanning for threats, keep us on fight-freeze response. Avoiding symptoms spare us emotional pain that we feel. Negative thoughts and feelings give us a sense of control on the situations that we experienced in the past. Re-experiencing, helping us to resolve what to happen to us in the past. The symptoms maybe go away on their own over time, but for some of the people, for some of the children, they would become lasting and exhausting burden. And then our individual meetings become a lifeline for them. It is undeniably true, but also surprisingly how easily it appears for these children and parents to open up about their feelings. And the single most important reason was that I'm Ukrainian myself. I'm from Lviv and I speak the same language. And me, myself, have the same feeling and difficulties when I moved to live in UK. As a result, it took relatively little time to secure meta benefits for their mental health in highly cost-effective and efficient manner. It was also admirable to observe how keen everyone I came across to succeed it to be independent and contribute back to the UK for taking them in. then thank you, all of you, for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Kateryna, and all of you. If you've looked through agenda, there'll be a very interesting workshop from her, who we all looking forward to as well, is how to talk to children about war. I think that's another question that sometimes can be an elephant in the room, especially when you have a mixed cohort in a mainstream environment. But we've got one last speaker, and David Trickey for us, especially as also Kateryna mentioned, from psychologists from Ukraine. We always partner, and we want to hear from the professionals from UK in the country. David Trickey is a consultant clinical psychologist. He is the co-director of UK Trauma Council, who we also partnered with when they developed their resources for mainstream schools on trauma. David is in a different conference today in Europe, but we've got the pre-recorded keynote speech from him.
Hello, I'm David Trickey. I'm a consultant clinical psychologist, and I've specialised in working with traumatised children, young people and families for 20 years or so now. I'm also co-director of the UK Trauma Council, which I'll tell you a little bit about in a moment. I'm so sorry that I can't be there with you today. I'm such a big fan of St Mary's and all that it has done to support the recovery of traumatised children and young people. I'm really disappointed that I can't be there to be part of the learning and part of the great discussions. I know that you're going to have an amazing day. If you'll let me, I'd love to make a small contribution just by saying a little bit about the UK Trauma Council and a little bit about what we know from psychology about what helps recovery following trauma. So let me tell you first about the UK Trauma Council. It's a project based at Anna Freud where we create resources to help those working directly with traumatised children, young people and families. We have various different resources, some aimed at childhood trauma and the brain, explaining how children's brains adapt to their experiences and what we can then do to help when problems arise. We have some resources about traumatic bereavement. We have resources about post-traumatic stress disorder. We have a set of resources for schools and colleges following critical incidents that affect them. But we also have a set of resources about childhood trauma, war, migration and asylum. We have toolkits there for schools and other educational communities, for grassroots organisations, and for providers of accommodation to children and young people. We also have an animation there which is aimed at children and young people, helping them to understand what trauma is and how they might be able to cope with what's happened to them. And we have some other resources for the young people to help them again understand how trauma might be affecting them, but also what are the strategies that other young people have found useful. We do a little bit of training. We have resources there to try and help put research into practice. Some videos explaining some concepts, or we take a look at the research and try and apply it to people's practice, and we try to nudge policy in the right direction. We have monthly webinars. Our next one is on the 24th of October, looking at recovery, agency and voice. So often traumatic experiences really take away a person's voice, and we're going to look at how that works and the importance of giving them back their voice and their control in recovery. But if we think about the way that children and young people react and respond to traumatic events, I mean, whether you look at diagnoses such as post-traumatic stress disorder or just the sorts of difficulties they might develop, broadly speaking, after events, they are likely to follow one of 4 different paths. One, some children and young people are pretty unaffected. Remarkably, they go through the most incredible experiences and they don't seem to have an impact on them. Some of them will seem to be doing okay, so they wouldn't have any particular distress or difficulties, but they have this, what we sometimes call latent vulnerability, where later on in life they will develop difficulties. Many or some will develop difficulties that endure and need a bit of extra help and support. But many will start off by being very distressed and have quite a lot of difficulties. But over time, they will recover. And what I'd like to say to you today is there are things we know that will help recovery, that will make a recovery more likely and an enduring problem less likely. So what are the elements of that environment that people can provide where people are more likely to recover? Whether that's at home, whether that's at school, whether that's in sports club, whatever it is, how can we create an environment where recovery is more likely? Well, the really good news is that the hard work has been done for us. Some psychologists and other mental health professionals looked at the research and agreed on principles that will aid recovery. And what I love about these 5 principles is that they are evidence-based. They didn't just make them up. They looked at our best understanding of trauma and how it works, and therefore what helps people to recover following trauma. I love the fact that they're all completely sensible. There's no big surprises here. In fact, many of you will already be doing these sorts of things. And I love the fact that they're principles, not a prescription. It doesn't say do this on day 7, do that after 6 months. It says if you want to help children, young people, and indeed adults recover following traumatic events, then think about these 5 areas. How can you help them to feel safe? How can you help them to feel calm? How can you help them to feel connected? How can you help them to feel in control? And how can you help them to feel a sense of hope? So very briefly, I'm going to say a bit more about each of those. The first is, how do we help children and young people to feel safer? Do we need to make sure their basic needs are being met? Food, water, shelter. Can we bring in some routine and structure and familiarity? That's how many young people feel safe when things are predictable and they know what's going to happen next. Do we make sure that the people around them are consistent as much as possible? Do we make sure they are able to think through what's happened and what they hear is happening elsewhere in the world to people that they know and love? Much as we might want to try and protect them from some of those details, in fact, if they're going to hear them from other places, it's really important that the adults around them help them to make sense of the things that they hear about. The second principle is calm. How do we help people to regulate their emotions? How do we help them to notice how physiologically aroused they might be, and how can they bring that down? Do they need to learn some breathing techniques, some relaxation techniques? Is it coloring that helps them? Is it sports that helps them? Is it talking? Is it being with someone? Let's work out for each of the young people that we're involved with, what is it that helps them to take control of their physiological arousal so that they can feel calmer? We know from so much research that connection or attachment or social support are really important for buffering the impact of stress and trauma. So let's make sure the children and young people that we're working with have that sense of connection and are well supported. Let's look out for the ones that might be isolating themselves or that seem to have fewer connections with other people. Let's make sure that those around them are taking the time to spend time with children and young people and make that connection and listen to what they have to say. The next one is a sense of control. How do we make sure they feel they have some control over some things? Of course, there's some things that children and young people don't have control over. There's some things that none of us have control over. There's plenty of things that they do have control over. Let's make sure we are giving them as much control as possible. Let's make sure we're not doing things for them, but helping them to do things for themselves. And finally, a sense of hope. How do we help them to feel hopeful about the future? Now, this isn't about minimizing or trampling over their ideas of what's happened to them already. We listen to that and we listen carefully to their worries, and we try to weave in some positive future thinking as well. That might only be on a day-to-day level. What is it we're going to achieve today? But also, what are the strengths and the resilience factors that we have? What's helped us get through stuff in the past? And therefore, what are we going to do perhaps together to get through this in the future? And where are we headed? Where do we want to be in the future? So whatever your role in the lives of children and young people, I think these 5 principles have something for us. It gives us a framework to stop and think about how we respond. Very often when we're working with traumatized children and young people, we want to fix it. We want to try and make it better. But actually, this framework of principles gives us the chance to take a step back, to take a breath, and think through how can we, in our role, whatever that is, help children and young people to feel safer, to feel calmer, to feel more connected, to feel they have more control, and feel more hope for their futures. Because those are the things that are going to make a recovery more likely. Thank you so much, and I look forward to hearing how your day went. I know that it's going to be brilliant. Thank you. Bye-bye.
I'll pass over to David Trickey, the applause of the audience. And this is the end of our part one of our conference today. And before we move to the panel discussion, our final session, the Q&A and also our resolution, I would like to invite here to address you, I would like to invite Orysya Novetska, who is Chair of Governors, who is our operations officer and also the person who shares with me all of the adventures that Ukrainian St. Mary's Trust is taking us on. So Orysya has got also a special address to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's such an honor to have you here today. So on behalf of the governors, I would like to thank you for the presence at today's conference. And I can't be more proud for what we achieved in the last 2.5 years. And today, I suppose it's a summary of all the hard work we've been doing and we're sharing of what we achieved with all of you. So also, today's resolution, which will be adopted and handed over to the government, will be a summary of a great collaborational work. And it will make, hopefully, changes not just for Ukrainian displaced children, but for other refugee groups in the UK. So I have a great honor today to address you with the letter we received in the morning from the Minister of Education. I'm going to read it in Ukrainian, and Svetlana will be translating this letter.
Dear esteemed guests and members of the conference, thank you so much to the Ukrainian St. Mary Trust for the initiative and the organization of this very important conference, which is aimed at the war-affected children.
Окрема вдячність нашим міжнародним партнерам за їхню
I would like to extend special thanks to our international partners for their invaluable attention and support of the future of Ukraine. It is a great honor to address such an esteemed gathering because today, as never before, it's very important to join our forces together to overcome the aftermath of war, especially in education. During the war, children face a number of new challenges: moving houses, resettlement, worrying about their loved ones fighting at the front sustaining wounds, or even dying. Under such harsh life situation, they face new questions that arise and they cannot find answers to them independently. So the aim of adults is to explain to them what is going on and help them overcome this difficult period. The conference gives this unique opportunity to exchange the experience, to deepen our knowledge and find new ways to support our children. We are their main source of love and stability. Touching, hugging, having honest conversation, and joining in common activities are those things that allow us to bring them the feeling of safety and confidence in tomorrow. We adults also go through very harsh challenges, but we need to understand and remember that our attitudes and our actions set the example to our children. The power of our unity is leading us to the victory, and this conference is another testament that every day we're becoming stronger and wiser. Ukrainians, wherever they are in the world, are always united in their goal to support each other and to build the future for their children. Our common goal is to pass to our children the lessons of resilience, courage, and love to their homeland.
І тому перед вами, шановні
therefore
учасники
you, the esteemed members of this conference, have a very important task in front of you: to bring together all the knowledge and experience that are aimed at preserving the most important potential of Ukraine, our children.
Дозвольте побажати вам
Allow me to wish you new discoveries. Slava Ukraini! Thank you, ladies, and no pressure at all to have a Q&A after we've been addressed by the Minister of Education of Ukraine, Oksana Lysovay. But I think it shows us once again that for Ukraine, every child matters, no matter where they are, no matter which state they're in. Our task is to really preserve that Ukrainian identity and keep them healthy as much as we can. And we move to the discussion panel. Can I please ask to the panelists to come up and take a seat over there? So I have great honor to invite Helen Hetmanenko, the parent of one of our students. Also, Maria Callias from Children's War Charity. I would like to invite Nelly Barkitova to join us. So some of you will have a chance to address the audience, and the others were one of the key speakers today. So after we hear from three more speakers, we'll be able to answer the questions and have open discussion. I would like Dr. Jai to be the moderator of this discussion, and I also would like to invite Kateryna, come up here to the front. Yeah, and Jai. Yeah, so then. So I would like to invite Helen, if you allow you are happy to address us, to speak to us in English.
Hello, everyone. My name is Helen Hetmanenko. I am from Kharkiv, from Saltivka, if you hear about this district. And I had an ordinary life. I had a husband with whom I raised my child. I went to my favorite job. I went to my favorite family vacation. My family had a lot of plans for the future, both large and small. In the winter of 2022, we tried to ignore the constant information pressure about full-scale invasion. No one didn't want to believe it. Everyone wanted to live normal lives. We had plans for renovation in summer 2022. My husband had to open a new furniture workshop with his business partner. I had to launch a new interesting project with my team at work. No one didn't want to believe it. We didn't want to believe it. Even my husband got a phone call from the military enlistment office the day before the invasion. The military enlistment office asked my husband to come to check the data. With my staff, Yura asked, no, just come check the data. Even there, they didn't want to believe that it could begin, but it began. In February 24, 2022, we, like million people of Ukraine, woke up to explosion. The realization what had happened didn't come immediately. Anyone didn't want to understand what had really happened. It seems like it would be end very soon, in 2 or 3 days at most. My husband started packing his stuff, told me that we should stay at home. We lived on the ground floor, and it seems to him that the fairly safe place for us in that period of time. And he told me, take care of our child. He explained me rule of 2 walls, packed his stuff, and went to the military enlistment office. He couldn't help but leave, because he fought in Donbass 2015-2016, and people with combat experience had to go first. He is gone. I couldn't stay at home. Everything exploding around, and it was scary. My son and I found a basement in nearby house. There were people, and in that moment I wanted to be closer to someone. That evening, my husband called me and told me that I had to pick up our son and leave Saltivka. He told me that it seems to would be the most dangerous areas in Kharkiv. I pick up son and leave. And it so happened now, Saltivka, the most ruined district of Kharkiv. I was sure that I wouldn't see my husband for a very long time, but I saw him the very next day, wounded. He received a shrapnel wound in his arm in Chuguyev. In the first day of war, Russians bombed our infrastructure. And in Chuguyev based 92 brigades in which my husband served. But no one could help him there, because in the first day of war, military and civil life in Ukraine was in a chaos. My husband returned to Kharkiv, and we in the shelled city started look for a surgeon who could get the fragment from his arm. Because for some reason, the military hospital was evacuated from Kharkiv. Thank God we found a surgeon. I left Kharkiv the week after war started. My husband insisted that I should pick up our son and leave Kharkiv. I didn't want to live without him, but he explained me that he was stayed there to protect our country, and I had to protect our child. He understood very well what could happen to me if Kharkiv occupied. The part Kharkiv region was occupied in the early days of war. I work in a public organization that has international funding. In Russia, people like me call foreign agents. In addition, my husband is a military man. And on the internet, you can easily find my article about this Ukrainian military in Donbass. As a journalist, I run a project in local newspaper called Life for Ukraine about this Ukrainian soldier. He was right. I started getting emails with threat in the end of September this year. A known person wrote me that they find me and denazification me. Furthermore, my personal information, including passport, driving license, home, registration, my colleagues found in the Telegram channel the Kharkiv Civil Military Administration in exile. Russian occupied authorities moved to Belgorod when Ukrainian troops liberated part of Kharkiv region in 2022. My photo and personal information were published in their official Telegram channel. He considered me as an accomplice of Nazi regime and accused me of serious and especially serious crimes, sentence of 15 years of prison. It so happened that my husband also gave his life for Ukraine. 1 year ago, I received a phone call informing me that my husband had died. His body still cannot be taken from the battlefield near Bakhmut, because it's a very dangerous place. But I still little hope for body swap procedure. Last time I saw my husband in summer 2023. We spent an incredible 2 weeks together. We both pretended that we had an ordinary life. People around us also pretend that explosions and air alarm were normal. Then in Kharkiv, he gave me T-shirt I wear now. It was his last gift. The hardest thing in my life just now is to explain our child that his dead father is a hero. Because my son wants a living father, not a dead hero. And the longer that horrible war continues, the more hero becomes dead. And the horrible, and this constant horror gradually become ordinary life for Ukrainians. Thank you for your attention. If you have any questions.
This is the story we're sharing of that ongoing trauma, of that re-traumatization. Just living in Ukraine doesn't mean that the war is not going to caught up with you. And that's why what we say, the children are safer here. But the challenges these parents and the children face while the war is ongoing are unimaginable. And I really, really appreciate that you share this story with us today. And even more, thank you for the trust that you allowed us to help you and help your son. To continue, we have online guest. We have with us today Viktoriia Gorbunova, a researcher, a psychologist. And what's important is to understand the long-term impact of war and long-term impact of trauma. And long is not about days, months, or years. Long is about generations. And Viktoriia is going to share with us the transgenerational effect of trauma on the nations. Viktoriia, can you hear us? Hello. So, yeah, the audience is all yours.
Okay. Thank you for inviting. It's a pleasure to be here. And my deepest thanks to Alena for your opening and for being so open and so natural. And what I want to say is that any research data will look dry and shallow after such a living and paying story. But I was invited to share some research data. And the main questions, what I would ask to address, what can we do to prevent the consequences for future generations, the consequences of genocide? Because what we have now, that's nothing less than actually constant attempt to eliminate Ukrainian people, to actually make all us dead and forgotten. And I want to base actually my presentation on one of research which I conducted together with my colleague. And this research was about psychological consequences of transgenerational trauma on Holodomor. I'm sure that you know what is it, Holodomor. Some term is derived from the two Ukrainian words, to be killed by starvation. And what we actually had, we had one of the largest famine in Ukrainian history, and this famine, this starvation, was provoked by the Soviet authority in 1932-33. The number of victims reached 47 million, according to different estimations, because you can imagine how it's hard to estimate victims when you have actually no access to real data which were concealed by Soviet government, and still we have difficulties to reach and open those data. The Holodomor has been recognized in 34 countries around the world as a genocide attempt to eliminate Ukrainian people. What's important then, this month, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe adopted the resolution of commemoration of the 19th anniversary of the Holodomor. And it emphasized that the current genocide, which is committed, still keep by Russian Federation in the war against Ukraine, is just repetitive attempt to kill Ukrainians. Back to transgenerational trauma. What is it and how we can understand what already happened and what can happen with us as this generation of descendants of people who survived. The most common consequences of transgenerational trauma are psychological changes in future generations regarding their worldviews, values, self-attitudes, and behavioral strategies. Also, it affected the ways how next generations try to resolve daily problems and build relations, how we treat our children, how we install, this image of the future. The psychological consequences of transgenerational trauma we can divide into main categories. First of all, it's cognitive changes, way of thinking, of how we actually try to understand, to perceive the world, people around us, ourselves, and behavioral changes, way of behavior. Our behavior, how we try to actually, solve daily problems, act, behave, and so far, so on. If we look at diagnostical manuals, which state some diagnostical criteria for post-traumatic stress disorders, we will see two main groups of such criteria. First of all, it's internal or external avoidance of anything which is connecting with trauma. And we understand that in next generation, it can reflect in some personal attitudes to what actually happened, and again in some patterns of storytelling, how we tell about this past event to our children, how we try to share stories inside the families and with our friends, relatives, and other people around us. Second big category is negative changes in mood and cognitions. And if you try to think what we can pass to next generation, actually we can pass those family worldview attitudes. Actually, what we tried to research in our study, we tried to understand what kind of personal attitude descendants of people who survive during the Holodomor, and also how they try to share their stories. And we tried to explore their worldviews and attitudes regards to the Holodomor and also their behavioral strategies. The main result very bit shocking, because what we found, I will not dive deep in different research details. I tried just to summarize because of shortage of time, of course. What we found, it's the avoidance of speaking about the Holodomor is more common among families whose ancestors suffered from traumatic events. Why? And it's obvious because this avoidance symptoms was passed through a rule about silence. You can't speak about what happened. I'm sure that, of course, it's because of this diagnostical criteria, avoidance, but also it's because of Russian propaganda. Because it was forbidden and it was dangerous actually to speak, to share anything about what's going on. Then negative personal attitudes to the Holodomor, avoidance and devaluation of Holodomor-related topics and actions are present among individuals who do not know much about the traumatic event during the Holodomor. And can you see this picture? People can speak because of trauma and propaganda. And those who can't speak, who can obtain this knowledge, actually they have this kind of avoidance and this devaluation when they try diminish value actually of people. And also, for example, they do not attend events which try to honor dead people, which try to actually give those historical explanation and find people who are really responsible for crimes they committed. And one more interesting thing, the most widespread Holodomor-related worldview attitudes and behavioral strategies within families, they correspond to trauma-related topics, such as child and family feeding patterns. And if you ask any Ukrainian granny which question she will ask her grandchildren first when they, for example, come from school or just having a call with her, it will be a question about food. What did you eat today? What did you have for dinner, for lunch, for breakfast? Preservation of food and supplies, distrust towards authorities, disappointment in the government, and importance on family survival. Like family needs are higher than community needs because you need actually to survive. Here you can see some of example of such actually stereotypes, attitudes, which we transferred or which were transferred to us from actually our previous generation. If you feel tired, weak, or dizzy, there are disturbing symptoms that require an obligatory medical explanation. And I know how many challenges now Ukrainians face abroad around medical health and support, because any sign of tiredness can be actually explained as something quite dangerous. And a lot of medical people can't, medical staff abroad can't understand. There is no need to be so disturbed and so worried, but Ukrainians are, because of the psychological consequences. You need to have you need to grow, vegetables, plants, fruit trees. You should not have more children than you can feed. And it's also interesting how this attitude is different among different Ukrainian territories. Those where Holodomor was more persistent, for us it's usual to have less children than in those territories where Holodomor was not so severe, or even there are some territories which actually very lucky to avoid full extent of the disaster. You have to, first of all, take care of the well-being of your family. Children should always be well fed. You should not throw out bread and other food leftovers. For Ukrainian, bread is something sacred, and you can't behave, without, even without some spiritual attitude toward bread. Bread is really sacred things for Ukrainian. You have to make food preserves and always have a supply of food in the house. You cannot trust anyone, especially the authorities, because you understand the Holodomor was actually caused by authorities. That's why for us it's so hard actually to trust. And if kids are seen, then perhaps they are not feeling well or are sick and need to be better fed. And question, and I want actually to open, if not discussion, then just way of thinking what we can do to prevent the transgenerational trauma consequences for future generation because of
next Russian attempt to eliminate Ukrainians. From my actually side, I'm sure that we should speak about trauma, that we should narrate, that we should explain as much as our children can comprehend. And on the stage of public, opinion, we also should be free, and we really should be rich in details when we are sharing our stories. Then again, my greatest thanks to Elena for her story, because I guess it's what we can do for our children to avoid psychological consequences of this current genocide. We can share our stories. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. And yes, true. I think that also echoes with what you discussed in your workshops, and particularly what Kateryna spoke about. Yes, so children want to talk about their trauma. We just need to find the way, to find the bridge, how to facilitate those conversations. And to continue this conversation, we touch a lot today on trauma recovery techniques. So everything, every workshop, every speech comes back to trauma recovery technique, really the resource that us normal citizens could use to be supportive, to do that societal change. And Maria Callias today will speak on behalf of Children in War charity and provide the insight from their perspective, why they developed this, and what it's all about. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much indeed for inviting me to this event. I found it very moving, both the experiences and the hard work that's taking place to try and minimize the long-term impact of the trauma on children. I find it very, very heartwarming to see how things that started in a small way are spreading, and I hope having a very positive influence for many children and families. Well, just briefly to introduce myself, I'm a clinical psychologist by training, consultant clinical psychologist, worked in public services and academic settings, as well as clinical work all my working career. I'm now formally retired, but I think being chair of the Board of Trustees of Children in War UK at the moment is quite a full-time job. Partly because we're in a state of development ourselves, and also thinking about the enormous needs and how our little bit can make a contribution. Children in War UK is a registered charity that's been a charity in existence since May 2021, 3 years ago, not many more. But we have a longer history of working in the UK from a UK base, as well as an even longer history for Children in War Foundation. And if I go back to the very beginning of when Children in War Foundation started, even before that, it grew out of work that Bill Ewell and Adley Dirikov, Bill being a British UK academic clinician, and Adley being the equivalent clinical psychologist as well in Norway. They were invited by WHO, I think UNICEF branch, to please help children who were traumatized in the former Yugoslavia. And out of that work, the reason they were invited was that a lot of people were rushing in to help children. We all have that instinct, got to do something. But there was very little foundation to what was being done to address the trauma aspects, and it wasn't clear whether that was being helpful or not. Of course, children needed occupation, being thought about, cared for, and all the rest, but were they actually dealing and helping with the psychological aspects of trauma that they were experiencing? So out of that work, Bill and Atlee and others established the Children and War Foundation, which is registered in Norway. And together with Patrick Smith, they drafted the first TRT manual. That manual has undergone some revisions and changes, with a little bit of input also from other psychologists in the UK, because the foundation's been going over 20 years, and about 12 to 13 years ago, Bill again, founder, established a supporters group in the UK, which comprised mainly of clinical psychologists that he knew. I was one of his colleagues at the Institute of Psychiatry, as it was then, from 1971, so long ago, and several other people. The initial group was mainly psychologists, with one psychologist's husband supporting us as well. And we supported the foundation both through doing work here on TRT, helping with the development of tidying up the manual to make it more accessible, and running training here and abroad, together with our colleagues in Norway. We also helped a little bit with fundraising, which was mainly us doing events or people running or whatever. We don't have any support from any organization, which I think is a mistake, and we need to be a little bit more proactive now in trying to get money so that we can actually do the work that needs to be done. We ticked along as a supporters group, and I was in fact, as chair of that group, on the board of directors in Norway, until we hit a glitch, and it was a very pragmatic problem that the bank decided we were too small to have an account here, and we couldn't function without an account and recognition as a charitable organization. So we had to bite the bullet, and Bill again and I and the rest of the group thought this is a huge undertaking, but we're going to have to do it, otherwise we won't be able to continue existing. So we did, and negotiated with the Children and War Foundation, with whom we keep a good relationship, and we use the materials that are copyrighted to them, but have been involved with, people from here and there in developing. So that's what happened 3.5 years ago. And as you've heard, we lost Bill very unexpectedly and sadly nearly a year ago. And Patrick Smith, who was on our board, finished his term of office earlier this year. A lot of us are getting on in years, and we had a big drive and have appointed quite a few new trustees with a broader range of skills as well. So we now have a board of trustees that's newly come in, with some of us existing ones around too. And hopefully we're going to be able to take this forward in a positive way. The other thing that's worth saying is that Laura Timms, who's been very heavily involved with the Ukrainian training, both in Ukraine with Bill, even from 2015, and obviously here as well, and with my colleague sitting next to me, Kateryna, and she's been very supportive and done a lot of work, and unfortunately she couldn't be here today, which is a shame, but she's very much in spirit here. So, we, as a charity in the UK, have the same aims as the Children in War Foundation, and these are to train and disseminate knowledge of good psychological, evidence-based practice, and to particularly follow on the work that was done, as I said, from early on, to consider the way this could be disseminated and help lots of children, because as both John and Jay have said, clinical services cannot cope with the demands, and actually there's a question about whether the model of individual intensive therapy is appropriate for everybody. So the materials that have been developed, TRT being the main core, there are other adaptations or extensions, I should say, that address the issues relevant to unaccompanied minors, to traumatic grief, and to disasters. The materials can be adapted and are adapted, but there is a core fundamental structure to the way the materials in the program is developed and written. And it follows a sequence that allows children to work through and gain knowledge and experience in a particular way. The other important aspect of this is it's not a crisis intervention that you can do the moment disaster, war strikes, etc. In a sense, children have to be in a slightly safer place for things to be able to be taken up and worked. The other very important part is that it is a group approach, which means children meet together in the group, led by experienced people who've been trained in the use of running the program, and it's a shared experience. And I think this sense of not being the only one who's having these strange reactions in your life is a very important one, and also the skills that children learn to manage. It's been found to be successful in helping most children and many children. There will always be children who need much more intensive help, and I'm not sure if we have any figures about the numbers who've been through, and I think that that's one bit of research that still needs to be done among many. So the one aim of both Core Foundation and us is to run training and make available materials to help people be able to meet children. And it is extremely heartening to hear how this has been taken on board by St. Mary's and the impact and effect that it's having. Very important that it's done in a context where there is support. But we have trained people who've gone out individually, having the right kind of background and able to take things forward and help some children too. The other important aspect of the work is development and improvement of our approaches to children, and that requires two kinds of research. One, knowing what's happened with when you've trained and how it's cascaded down, and how effective it's been. The other is other research in the area generally about the impact and nature of trauma that children suffer and what else helps children to do. That's another aim of our organisation. So far, we are in the early stages of thinking about research. The Children in War Foundation have much more experience of this and also work elsewhere. And the third thing is that we work together, we support each other. We don't meet frequently, but I am hoping that we will increase that link. It's been kind of early days, derailed a little bit by the demands placed on all of us, because they are a small group and so are we. And it is important that we continue to do what we do. Thank you very much.
It's been so interesting to hear from everybody this afternoon. Opportunity for questions. I will get off this stage and move around a little bit. Yeah, I'm just thinking we've covered, personal stories. We've covered a lot of psychology and theory throughout the day, and we've also covered a lot of practical interventions, ideas, and how to do it. But I'm curious about any questions that people may have. I'll walk around. Any questions? Yes. And please do introduce yourself again, just to remind us who you are.
Thank you, Jay. My name is Paul Stedman. I work for Nestle, and we feel very honoured to be financial and practical supporters and partners of Inna and the team of St Mary's. It's more of a reflection rather than a question, because I attended workshop 1, where we looked a bit more into TRT, and I was appreciative there's a lot of practitioners in the room, and I'm not one. I'm a life scientist by academic training, but a business person by career. And as a business person, what instantly came to my mind was scalability. Because frankly, it's about taking good ideas and making them big, or what Amazon would say, how do you 10x it? And the one thing that struck me were questions in the room from other practitioners, Ukrainian colleagues, who were saying, how do we take something like TRT and apply it outside of London? And it strikes me that we've got huge demands on clinical services for children for mental health. The new government itself is talking about trying to put mental health practitioners into every school, which I think is going to be a huge thing to try and do. And yet here we have something that can help groups at scale that is evidence-based. And for me, that's about partnership. How do you actually get Ukrainian children in the other schools to benefit by convincing other local authorities and other NHS trusts that this is a model that is proven to work and actually could benefit children with other forms of trauma who are indigenous to the UK, but also benefit Ukrainian children at the same time, because it's about creating that connection, that convergence. So it's a reflection that it's different. I sit here and struggle to see how would the Ukrainian school network scale this outside of London, because London has all of that richness around it. Other towns and cities don't. But you've got something that you've shown can work, and therefore, is there a return for other authorities to partner so that Ukrainian children and other children suffering perhaps other forms of trauma that thankfully we're lucky in this country aren't generally war unless they are forced migrant children. So it's a reflection on how to try and scale it, which I suspect from your own resources will be very difficult to do. But those partnerships, perhaps there's something possible there. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that an invitation? I think it's a really fair reflection, and I'm just in awe of the work that Inna and the rest of the team have done in advocating this very argument, because we have existed separately for many, many years. But what this model has allowed us to do is come together and test something which independently, as academics, as clinicians, we have a fair idea would work. So this is pioneering, and I absolutely think it's scalable because the networks exist. So if we think about how our services are organised in this country, we do have local authorities. We do have NHS trusts. A lot of our core services exist. Children in War has a network. You know, we have trainers all over the country. We have trainers in and out of the country. So it is possible, and when you add to that the remote working and the sharing of expertise, I feel very confident that it's scalable. But I'm always coming back to Inna to think about how we fund these initiatives, and I know that's a big ambition.
I think that's definitely a plan. Because we started with one group, we started one school, we started with one pilot. Today we're talking about 2,500 children supported through various projects, ESWs in 6 councils. So we managed to scale it already. The first step we see is definitely utilizing the Saturday Sunday schools network we have around the country, because we've got bilingual resource there with the TRT training and the supervision of the model from all the partnership. It's doable, but we go back to the funding. So that's why one of the points in the resolution that we discussed was to put that into the policy so that local authorities had more backup to release funding. This is a cost-effective model. It has proven to be much cheaper than going through the existing models and all of the partnerships already involved. So we are preventing a lot of expenditures. So I think the resolution and suggestions, step 1 would be utilizing communities, Saturday supplementary schools, and it's the same story for not just for Ukrainian children. It's the same story for other children coming from other cohorts of crisis.
You actually alluded to another really untapped resource which we have across the country, which is the voluntary sector and independent sector. On one of our previous projects, we were looking for a very specific language. And putting a call out via the internet revealed that actually we do have diaspora populations with language skills that perhaps we don't utilize. But yes, I'll stop talking. Is there anything you wanted to add?
I just wanted to add that we have done training for local authorities, some voluntary organisations like Bernardo's and so on. What we don't know is how they've cascaded within their organisations. They have the sorts of organisations that should work. There were attempts to do something within a school support system that for various changes and chops within the organisation, it didn't happen. But we do think that this has a role in some of the early intervention mental health services for children and should be integrated. And I think we need to be quite proactive about making the case for working with them to do so.
It's about where it best fits in the government strategy, isn't it? I mean, you could argue it fits across domains like education or housing, but there's a recently published report by the Home Office around therapeutic interventions for forced migrants. That's an invitation for future case studies. So I think it's about aligning ourselves to then present a strategy, which is what we hope to do very soon.
Jay, sorry, can I just add from a local authority perspective? Hi, everyone. I am here from Westminster City Council, and I wear double hats in a way, being a social worker, principal social worker for Westminster Children's Services, and also transformation lead for the Ukraine response team. I think, obviously, a relationship with St. Mary's and with our partnership with CAST has achieved amazing results for young people across the Barbara. I think what we have seen is that even though our local authority works in a very systemic and sort of trauma-informed way, sometimes, and again, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's so so powerful to hear that personal account. And actually, sometimes we don't realize when families arrive on our, doorstep of our office, we don't know, we don't have that privilege of knowing all the kind of detailed experiences that they've gone through. So very often that relationship becomes very transactional in terms of, how can we help you? And then taking at a face value what the family may share at that point. So I think what this partnership has given us is that really sensitive window of building more trust with the community and really helping to build that bridge that I think we talked about many times in our workshop between the services that are available within the local authority setting, as well as kind of thinking about additional support that may need to be offered. I mean, Ina's been amazing and her team in terms of reaching out to all the different local authorities across the country. And I mean, I've personally spoken to at least 5 of them to just reflect on the positive experience that we've had, working with St. Mary's, because it is a new model. What you will find is that local authorities are quite stretched across the country. So again, obviously there is some additional funding pots that, is available through the Homes for Ukraine kind of funding scheme. And I think we've been really trying to think about how do we use that funding creatively in order to kind of support Ukrainian residents who have arrived in our borough through that process. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Any more questions, reflections, feedback?
Hi, my name's Josh Cole. I'm from the International Rescue Committee. First of all, thank you very much. It's been a really wonderful, interesting day. I wonder, not all children are fortunate enough to be able to go to schools like St. Mary's sort of at the weekend and have this support. So I wonder, from your opinion, what are mainstream schools in the UK doing very well in terms of how they support newly arrived refugee students? And also, what else could they be doing to better support them?
The schools in UK are doing the maximum they can and above with the resource they've got. So, and I'm great that you have International Rescue Committee here because we are using your resource. So definitely making sure that UK Trauma Council resources, IRC resources are available to the staff in mainstream schools. But sometimes it's not just about the resources, the training and the capacity within the curriculum to deliver that resource and be able to use that resource. We know how stretched the teachers are in mainstream schools, dealing with children with special educational needs today and the children who suffer with well-being problems in the national context. So when you get the refugee child who speaks another language, it's hard for the schools to do something unless they have a teacher who by luck happens to speak that language, or they use the online translators, all the possible forms to understand the child. I can say that definitely, as our colleagues mentioned, see the child, see them beyond the surface. So see them beyond the calm behavior or naughty, what is called naughty behavior. It might not be just naughty. We had at the beginning lots of questions saying that, do they not have behavior structure in Ukraine? Because on some reason, children who have arrived are very naughty, but they were showing signs of trauma. So really see beyond that, open discussions, create spaces, and I think refer to organizations working for trauma for in-house training and doing that. But as we discussed before, and what was clearly said in the speech of Dame Kristen Ryan, the training for the teachers to make the societal change, it needs to be part of the training programs for teachers educating to become educationists. So if we embed that into their degree, in 10 years' times, we'll have part of the teaching population knowing how to work with trauma. So we'll be there to support them rather than pick up the challenges they've got thousands of. Yeah.
And there is a lot of support available, in local schools for all residents, children. I think the issue that we have found is the trust. So whether it's the support available in school or within a local family hub or in a youth center, with this particular group of young people, the trust isn't there to go and access it. They go to St. Mary's, and we can all probably see why they do that. But I think one of the things Ina and I have certainly spoken so much over the last 2 years, is how do we hold their hand in order to reach the community services? Because there is so much support out there, but it's more about how do we make sure that support reaches young people who need it.
If I could just pick up one point, I think, which is that obviously government policy in the last few months, over the years, has been towards schools taking an independent line and developing their own services in their own line. And I'm certainly not going to comment on whether that's a good plan or otherwise, but it has had somewhat unfortunate impact on mental health services for children in schools. And the government acknowledged that in the Green Paper, needing to try and pull some consistency across. And, certainly when we were doing the Grenfell Tower response, part of our difficulty was that every school had different arrangements. There wasn't any consistency. And so you have to deal with each school on an individual basis. And in many ways, that process is going into reverse. So the strategy now is to try and get some consistency of approach. And I think that will go a long way to help you. I think we've got quite a way to go on that, but I think that will make an enormous impact if we can actually achieve that, get consistency in whatever way is needed. And so one of the advantages of the school, I think, in this structure is that it's consistent, has a consistent approach across schools. It's got the same interface, the same results. And that's quite important lesson to learn.
And just to add to that, that's what we discussed a lot in our meetings of multi-agency professionals, that many schools, because different local authorities use the education fund, Ukrainian education fund differently. Some allocated to each school, and they hired extra learning support assistants who spoke Ukrainian. And the effect was different because, again, the learning support assistant was supervised by the leadership team. And so it became more of academic assistance rather than trauma assistance. And then local authority wasn't aware also of that's what John, you mentioned, of what is happening in each school separately. And when we stepped in and centrally we have the supervision model, and it's not just that we've developed the program and it exists, we adapt it weekly because we take information from education support workers back to the meetings where we have local authority, we have clinical psychologists, we have people from education, we discuss early help, all the family hubs. We discuss, they advise us, we share information, we think, right, what do we do with this? We take it back to education support workers, they take it back to the school, teachers learn from them, their teams learn from them. We discuss in our network what worked well in one school, we take to the other 200 schools, and that centralized supervision gave structure and understanding at least what is happening in those 245 schools. So at least we know what support is centrally happening. And also we know the fantastic work that early help teams, Ukraine response teams, and social services and family hubs are doing there. Because before that, it seemed the parents would come to us say, oh, everything is like, the child is not happy. And you would think, oh, is no one doing anything? No, everyone was doing something, but not coordinating approach.
Not so much a question, because there are so many things that we've touched on here. Policymakers, and how do you get government support? It doesn't have to be money, but government support to make things happen. Partnerships that will work across the country, not rely on, a sort of postcode lottery of whether you happen to be a wealthy borough or not so wealthy borough, or a borough that's got lots of resource. So there's that, there's the partnerships, there's the inconsistency, there's the fact that teachers are very hard pressed and really just want to be able to teach, but at the same time they want to do their very best for the children. So there are many, many threads here. And I suppose I would just say a few things to keep in mind for the next stage. And the first is that any representation to get policymakers on side, and policymakers are very hard pressed too at the moment. Make sure there's an evidence base. I think you have got an evidence base. It might be a small evidence base, but so long as you've got an evidence base with significant difference that will stand up to scrutiny. So that's the first thing. You must gather your evidence. Then if you're going to get policymakers on side, you've got to do the heavy lifting for them. You've got to do have a plan that goes to them that says, this is what we propose, this is your problem that it will solve or will help you to solve. And by the way, this is how you can do it, and this is how much it will save you. And not just in money, but trouble, resource, coordination. So that kind of, those are some headlines, I would say, from the sort of policy bit. For the teachers in the schools, don't really, and I'm talking about initial teacher training as well as professional development. What they want is practical strategies that they can apply like now, because they want to do their best for their children. Yes, they might be interested in the theoretical background and in the research, but quite honestly, your average classroom teacher who is the one dealing with these children, they just don't have enough hours in the day to become researchers and to understand research as well. What they want you to give them is a proven methodology that they can adapt to their context. And that's why I love the idea of a framework, not a process. Because a framework means you've got some key skeleton principles, and then individual schools can tailor that to their specific context and what the difficulties are for their particular children. It might be trauma because of a terrible tragedy like Grenfell. It might be trauma simply because this is a part of the country that has high levels of unemployment and high levels of family destruction that causes trauma. There are all sorts of things. So for that part of it, definitely think about a practical toolkit that you can make available to people. And I'm afraid the final thing that always is necessary is just relentless persistence in getting the message across. You will only get one shot very often at getting government backing for anything. So you've got to make sure that initial approach is a really good offer, because the legislative and government agenda is just so full.
Where's this voice?
Extremely.
Thank you very much. Very strong points. Definitely very good practical advice. Thank you. And I think it brings us up to the resolution that we would like to, that we've taken from what has been discussed today, that we offer onto your discussion, ask for your support. But after we discuss the resolution, we'll round it up also with one more speaker from Ukraine. We've got a video poster. It will be short, but we really want you to hear her. So, Oleg, do we have it on the screen? So what we are suggesting, if I could... we discussed a lot of the problems. We discussed what's been done. And when we come to call for action, so definitely we touched on funding resources. We said resourcing sometimes even more than funding. So it's a two-way stream there. Good advice how we approach there. Project expansion beyond London. So really replication of the model outside the boundaries and capacity of St. Mary's Ukrainian schools and Ukrainian St. Mary's Trust. Implementation of trauma-informed module in teaching training programs that we've touched. Expanding trauma-informed training for current teachers. So, as been just mentioned, maybe less of the theory, because yes, there are lots of workshops, you come, you hear, but then you go back to the classroom, what do? So what are the resources? There are resources from partner organizations working with trauma. How do you make that available to every member of every primary and secondary school? Creating that agency, we've discussed that centralized approach. It can be the one monitoring Ukrainian families, can be the agency higher above, really that will be the advocate for the well-being and trauma support for children through their journey, children with trauma through their journey. But also what's important, that there should be communication between the departments, between the industries. So the employment services, the recruitment companies need to know what comes with resettlement, what comes with with your status of refugee through the years, how trauma impacts your certain behavior in an interview, right? Or you can have a skill set which will be right for that company, but you might not first open up your trust. So communication with NHS services. So we need the agency to be the advocate for the traumatized cohorts of people. We really speak for the enhanced community outreach, local community and the diaspora community. Strengthen partnerships with Ukrainian organizations, establishment of long-term support systems. What we see is that having experienced trauma and having had some kind of support doesn't mean you can be ticked off the list. Quite often, these cases close very quickly. Provision delivered, 7 weeks, 2 months, 7 months, ticked off, like case closed. But you carry trauma through life. There need to be follow-ups. There need to be really standardized measures to rescreen people, to understand where they are, to put preventative measures in place rather than be reactive all the time and dealing with the consequences of trauma triggers re-happening again. Community awareness campaigns, because what we realized, the word people didn't understand what trauma meant. So for them, trauma was that something the worst that happened. But sometimes we have different levels of resilience, and what can be very traumatic for one person might be less for the other, and on the opposite. So for some, moving homes under peaceful circumstances can be traumatic. But some people have to take that trauma on top of trauma. Advocacy for policy changes so that we can make the societal change. And again, for that to happen, we are dreamers here, but we now have practical tools how to actually bring that dream closer. So by taking decisive action to address these trauma-related changes, we can significantly improve the emotional educational outcomes for temporarily displaced Ukrainian children in this case, fostering resilience and hope in their new environments. And together, we can build stronger support system to empower these children, overcome their past, thrive in the future, and bring the societal change. So on your feedback form, we asked you if you are happy to support these suggestions that you would like to make as the outcome of this conference further to local authorities and representatives from the governmental structures. So if you're keen to be part of this, we welcome your support. We're welcoming a video poster from Khrystyna Shabat, Ukrainian, the psychologist and the chair also of the Center of Dignity in Lviv, and also a representative from Ukrainian Catholic University.
Dear participants of the conference supporting trauma recovery in war-affected children, my name is Khrystyna Shabat, and I'm the director of the Child Dignity Center at the Ukrainian Catholic University in Lviv, Ukraine. I would like to apologize for not being able to join online, and thank you for the opportunity to record this video. So, how does the trauma of war affect our children, and do refugee children really have a better chance of recovery? To answer this question, I would like to ask you what happened to the children and grandchildren of World War II refugees when the full-scale Russian invasion began. Were they enough recovered 80 years after the war? I saw Ukrainians, not even in Ukraine, all over the world, with the trauma of war. Could they sleep peacefully, buy expensive things, live a previous life, and maybe they also had depression, a desire to help, a new self-identification of themselves as a Ukrainian, not as a citizen of the world. Why does our Ukrainian world still work as the biggest logistic company on the planet? Indeed, the life of Ukrainian children, in Ukraine, in some is very different from the life of children who left Ukraine. So our children hear sirens every day, sometimes even at night. 25% of Ukrainian children in Ukraine are studying online since COVID. Many schools have been destroyed. There isn't access to adult military content for children. Many have friends whose parents serve in army, or our children play war with sticks, even if it is forbidden to bring a model of guns to school. They talk a lot about war. They ask whether it is possible to ask St. Nicholas about the end of the war. They pray for the end of the war. They go to the cemetery of heroes. So we also see the tendency about self-destruction, self-mutilate among teenagers, but we also see many teenagers who return to study in Ukraine because they cannot adapt abroad. So it is very important that they have someone to live the trauma through. So that it is very important for children that their friends and peers understand them, and that they can feel the same feelings and share them, to talk about losing someone together and dream together. So I want just to tell, and Ukrainian children have like that society, so because they live in the condition of war. I just also want to say that being and feeling safe are not the same things, and this is very important in the context of where we live. So children can be safe but not feel safe, and they can feel safe but not be safe. So we conducted a social study not so a long time ago on children's subjective sense of security, and we learned very interesting things. It turns out that in order to be safe, children need friends, adults with whom they can argue, feel that their opinion is important and that they are respected. This is subjective feeling of safety for children. Then we ask adults, what does it mean to feel safe for children? And adults answered the same question like this. Children need shelters, good conditions, Wi-Fi, and warm food. And it is very important and interesting because children and adults understand feeling of safety differently. Adults provide being, but children do not feel safe from this being. Another research of ours in the first 6 months of the war showed that the emotional state of a child directly depends on the emotional state, on the emotional condition of an important adult or parents. Therefore, adults greatly influence on the formation of trauma in a child. And it is important to know everything depends on adults' reactions. So I want to highlight the following. First, the child's condition and level of trauma depends on the adult reactions. Second, relationships are important for children. Friends, respect, sense of self-importance contribute to children's mental health. Third, it is important to care about someone like you during the war. That is why face-to-face education or face-to-face classes are important. So the children can learn and speak about it, about the war, and then formation of diaspora abroad is also important because it help to save the identity, and also it help to recover from the trauma together. Of course, being safe and feeling safe are different things, and children sense of security, a sense of safety depends on an adults. And fifth, we cannot just wait for the end of the war and talk about unicorns with children. We have to live our traumatic experience together. This is important in order to come out stronger and never forget who the enemy is. So I want to thank you, everyone who cares about Ukrainian children, wherever they are, wherever you are. They were affected for every child in Ukraine and for every Ukrainian child, for every adult without exceptions in Ukraine, and for every Ukrainian adult, for every Ukrainian around the world. So thank you, and best regards from Ukraine.
It's quite symbolic that we finish quite a sophisticated day with a keynote speaker from Ukraine, because we hope these children will have a chance to return to Ukraine, but we also need to prepare. We don't know. We hope the victory is tomorrow, but we don't know when it's coming. And we need to do everything possible to prepare them in case they choose to return, for that return. So it's really good to have the bridge in this communication with colleagues in Ukraine to understand the Ukraine's vision on what's happening to Ukrainians abroad, and also what we are doing here with the Ukraine and what's happening to the children, Ukrainian children here in UK. So to round this great day, I would like to thank you all for being with us on this journey, for being our support, for doing this together for Ukraine. And as you can see, so many people from Ukraine and from here are really grateful, appreciate, and see your support. I want also to say thank you to the board of Ukrainian St. Mary's Trust, that we can do these amazing things for the children who are under our care. And today we put another ambition in front of us, all of the children of UK. We would like to be there to support agencies to continue what we've started and modeled here together. I want to thank all of the speakers. For your time, for your messages across, for sharing your experience, your stories, and volunteering your time. I know we ask a lot, but thank you that you never say no. And huge thank you to our Ukrainian St. Mary's Trust team. We couldn't be prouder. This was a dream. That's our first conference. It seemed like an ambitious project. We felt, we questioned, would we be able to do that? But with you, it felt really easy. I think me and Orysya are planning the next one. Thank you, because I know most of you woke up at 4 a.m. this morning, went to bed at 2, and for all your 24/7 commitment to the projects of St. Mary's Ukrainian Trust. And of course, for the wonderful Tombia Fall team, because you also have gone above and beyond to support this initiative. I hope this is just the beginning of events of sharing experience. Please, let's stay in touch. Let's unite the forces, because together today we represent a force that can make a true change. So thank you.
And at the end, we would like just to say a few words. On behalf of our Board of Directors and Trustees of St. Mary's Trust, we would like to thank Ina Hryhorovych for her role in arranging this great conference. Without her effort, it wouldn't happen. Thank you very much, Ina, for bringing the light to those who need it. Thank you very much for caring about those who need it the most, about the children, about Ukrainian children, about the future of our nation. Thank you very much. Дякуємо дуже.
And all Ukrainians say, impossible, you can do it once. Miracle take longer. For Ukrainians, miracle is here.